Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the AV Experience. I have no idea what episode it is, probably episode 8, maybe episode 9, but I hope you guys have all had a wonderful week. Did we stream last week? No, we didn't, because I was going to CEDIA, and here we are. CEDIA is done, 2024, and we have some things to talk about. CEDIA was a good event. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of work, but, you know, good things come with a lot of work. So I think I set this stream to start at 8 and then just realized about 15 minutes ago that I meant 7, but I set it at 8 because I think I did it in Denver, and Denver is an hour behind Kansas City. So when I said 7 in Denver, it was actually 8 in Kansas City, and I just screwed everything up. But we went live at 7 Kansas City time or Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, and 5 p.m. Pacific time. So we are here, and we are going to go through some stuff after I give you some updates about what is going on, any updates with the MadVR Experience Center, what has come to fruition. So we do video calibration next Monday, and then 2 weeks after that, we do audio calibration. So Dwayne Davis is coming out on the 16th to do a video calibration, and then we are doing a audio calibration with Adam Peltz starting the 30th, and he'll be here for almost a week. AVH, that was my fault. I seriously screwed that up. I accidentally said 8 and I meant 7 because I said 7 in Denver and it just messed everything up. So that was my fault. But here we are. What else do we have to talk about? Anything else? It's great weather in Denver. Always good to see everybody. Though you do get put to work by everybody to make their rooms happen. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about what we saw at CEDIA and what I think could be a game changer and what you guys may be looking at. You're probably wondering about the projectors. We're going to talk about those. My time was limited with them, as it was with a lot of this stuff, and I want to make sure that people understand that most of the demos in at CEDIA, it's always a compromise. It's not ideal. You're dealing with sometimes some lackluster places and locations and setups, and you're really at the behest of all of these variables. So what I say and what I saw could be completely wrong because of what was shown and said by some of the vendors at CEDIA itself. But saying that, let's get into this. So first thing, some of this, guys, you may think is, why are we talking about this? But I thought it was cool, so we're going to talk about it. Okay, so let's make that bigger. And view, zoom in. Let's see here. Can we make this bigger? How big can we make it? That's probably better. All right, let's share this and see what we can get. Okay, so Sierra has a smart TV mirror. I thought this was cool. Now, I know you can make these on your own. You can do some stuff and put a PC monitor and some other things behind them, but I thought this was super cool. I thought it was awesome to see. It's another step in AV. It was stupid expensive, but I like that the product's even there because usually when it's there, it means that eventually it's going to be cheaper. So this product was really just about putting a TV in a mirror. You could do this already as a home tech project, but this company was selling them. They were stupid expensive. I think these mirrors, the 75-inch one was like $9,000. So super cool, super expensive. Rust Sound had a bunch of stuff. They had a bunch of different stuff. They had, let's see, what did they have? I accidentally went through that. So they had all of these different distributed audio pieces. They had a new passive soundbar. What were the specifics? So they had distributed audio. They had a single gain IP pad for it. They had their cinema soundbar, which was a passive soundbar. There's getting to be more and more of those on the market. I think they're a cool option. I think they give you more flexibility than an active soundbar. I mean, active soundbars are cool, but a lot of them have 5 million speakers in them, and they say, oh, we're going to give you Atmos. We're going to give you DTS:X, and it's just whatever. So I like these passive soundbars. I think they're more realistic in their approach. They have bigger drivers a lot of times. It's typically 3 individual channels, your left, center, right. And I think it's a better experience overall. You're seeing some of the big boy high-end manufacturers starting to make them. I think Wisdom has some now. Origin Acoustics has some now. Who else may have some? I know Martin Logan has them. There's just becoming more and more options on the market. And I think it's a win for everybody. Because like I said with the TV mirror, the more you have, the cheaper they get. And the longer they're on the market, the cheaper they get. So the earlier we see this stuff, the better it's all going to be. So that was Rust Sound. CEDIA, or excuse me, Sony had a bunch of stuff. So they had the TVs, which we had already seen, the Bravia 9. Then they launched the Bravia 8 and the Bravia 7. They had a couple sound bars, headphones. I didn't see these, whatever these were. The Theater Quad, I think, were wireless subs. And then the Bravia 8 and Bravia 9 projectors. Ryan, we will get to that sub. It is not going down. It's not going to go down to 8 hertz at anything close to reference. But the thing that I think most people are going to be interested in is the Bravia Projector 8 and the Bravia Projector 9. They changed their naming schema to better match up with everything in their lineup. Because let's face it, a lot of these things are getting confusing. Like, what is a 6,000, a 7,000, a 5,000? Why are they doing these naming schemes? Just do this. This makes way more sense. It makes way more sense. I'm going to put my face. That's too big. How can I make it small? This? There we go. Makes way more sense to do it this way and then update from there, right? Call it like the Projector 8 and the Projector 9 and then the Projector 10 and the Projector 11. Just do it in order. Don't change the numbers all the time. It gets confusing. So these projectors, what did they change? Well, they've got, let me zoom this in. They've got supposedly dynamic tone mapping. They went from 4K 60 to 4K 120. They have stupid low refresh rates. So if anybody's looking to game, these are pretty ideal options because if you compare it to something like the JVCs are slow. They are so slow in comparison to Sony and Epson. Tarhoya says, I'm a little worried about whether the XR processor being brought to the Bravia Projector 8 and 9 also carries over the non-defeatable processing as their TVs. That's a good question. Most TVs have non-defeatable processing, like motion handling. I don't know. I'd bet it's always been there and we just didn't know. Not really sure. But it looked better than the old one. The problem with that demo that I talked with Rick, with some people that were at the event was I don't know if it was done to make the OG 7000 look bad or if the 9 is just that much better. I don't think it was that much better, and I think they were doing something to the 7 to make it worse because there was a big difference, and I feel like there really shouldn't be. It's a minute increase in lumens. I think 4K 120 is a big one. The decrease in latency is a big one. Be good for the market. It's always good to have competition, right? Any more questions? If you guys have questions, even if I move on to something else. Yeah, I meant input lag. Sorry. Not refresh rate. Input lag. Thanks for correcting me, Ryan. I'm still recovering from being a disaster at CEDIA and, always being up late, getting up early, having to talk to people all day. It is what it is. Direct or DSU when watching movies, asked Mosin. There are some confusions. In my personal experiences, the dialogue is much better when using direct or straight instead of DSU. Your opinion. What is DSU? Are you talking about specific like sound modes in a Denon or Marantz? If you are, we will come back to that. Next slide. And if you guys, again, have any questions about any of this, let me know. So Lutron comes into tape lights. Not that there isn't already too many tape light manufacturers. There's already a lot. Lutron decided that they wanted to be another one. Now, Lutron makes great stuff. I think they're going to be on point and on par with Philips Hue, would be my guess. Lutron is the lighting leader. I have CEDIA all throughout my house. They make fantastic stuff. So before I forget, the pictures and all this stuff I'm pulling it from Rave, which Rave is a AV media company that goes to all these big events and puts out a bunch of news. So this is ravepubs.com. If anybody is interested, you can get news on what was at CEDIA. I take kind of a non-biased approach. They're not everywhere. I'm sure you have to pay for them to make content, but they do everything. I don't think they're looking for anything in specific. It's just what it is. Dolby Surround Up Mixer. All right, we will come back to that, Mosin. So I'm excited to see another big player into tape lights. I think there's a lot of really cheap options, but Lutron makes quality stuff. So I'm excited to have them in this part of the industry, not just in lighting and shades in general, but bringing a product like tape lights, I think is going to be good. So that's awesome. Not that they didn't really make them before, but RGB and WRGB options is going to be good. Kordz. So a lot of people probably haven't heard about or of Kordz, but Kordz is a cable manufacturer, and they do a bunch of different stuff. They do HDMI cables, they do speaker wire, they do interconnects, they do, what else do they do? Patch cables. They do a bunch of different stuff. The cool thing about them is they test all of their stuff through burn-ins. So they run all of their cables, all of them, not just as a test for one particular cable, like one particular line. They're going to test one cable to make sure it works. Every single cable that gets sold goes through a 72-hour burn-in. They do a lot of objective testing. So I think it's just great to see more options from them. One particular thing, and I don't have any pictures from this, and I don't think there's anything here they don't have any other pictures here on this. But one of the cables that I was really interested about that was shown at CEDIA is a low power HDMI AOC. And the reason I was excited about this, for anybody that doesn't know what AOC is, it's an optical cable. So it uses fiber optic. But it still uses copper in the EDID and HDCP, so all the low bandwidth stuff still uses copper. This is how the majority of the cables in the industry work. This isn't just something with Kordz. This is everybody. The cool thing about this cable, though, is it steals voltage from other buses that don't potentially need it and puts it on the EDID and HDCP lanes. And the reason this is important, because you guys have probably heard me complain about this in the past, is if you don't have a proper voltage on those buses, if the cable is long enough, even if it's an AOC, fiber for the video stuff, it will fail. And if HDCP fails, you're just going to get a black screen. Virtually no device, with the exception that I know of MadVR Envy, give you any indication that there's an HDCP error. So if it doesn't work, and for those also don't know, HDCP is checked multiple times a second. It is not checked just at the negotiation time. It is checked multiple times a second. So it could negotiate and start just fine and then eventually fail because of this. So just be aware that there's a multitude of different things that having poor power for HDCP that can cause. So I was really excited to see this. Now that this cable at launch is supposed to be only HDCP, not HDCP, HDMI 2.0, supposedly. But talking to the designer and the head of international for Kordz, he said that this cable should be able to support at their maximum lengths of 40 gigabits per second. Now, not 48 gigabits per second, but 40. So I was very excited to see that. They've just got really nicely well-engineered stuff. All of their patch cables are super nice. They come in many different colors. HDMIs are well put together. It's just, everything's really well done and well engineered, and it's really nice to see that kind of stuff coming to the industry. So be watching for Kordz. I don't think they sell anything directly, but they're getting to be a much bigger player in the industry. Onkyo! Bringing a new 9.2 channel receiver, the RZ30. I'm expecting it to be just a streamlined, slimmed down version of the RZ50. Always good, as we've talked about numerous times before this, with manufacturers bringing more options and putting more pressure on the industry, right? If you just have one player in one particular segment, like this price point, it's not great for competition, pricing, or the consumer. So having more of this, even if you don't buy this, is very, very important. Did they give a price point for this? MSRP of $11.99. Anybody know what the RZ50 costs? Probably a few $100s more than that. Equivalent of this with a Denon 9.2 is going to be a $3,800, and it is several $100s more than this. So the X3800H, I believe, is where this will equal out. The main differences between those, though, is the 3800H, I believe, has 4 subwoofer outs, and this only has 2. And I don't know how many channels of processing this one has. Does Onkyo do more channels of processing than they do amplification, or is that all you get? So pre-outs, 1, 2. Let me know in the comments what you guys find. Weem. So Weem is bringing more and more to the industry. They've got some partnerships with Origin Acoustics. They're a speaker manufacturer. But Weem is bringing streamers and a new amplifier to the market. So think like the SVS amp, the 2-channel amp that they do, Sonos amp, Blue Sound powered node, that kind of stuff. That's what this is going to compete with. So Ryan says, back on the Onkyo thing, RZ50 was initially $1,599 MSRP. It's around $1K now. Dang. So I'd imagine the RZ30 is going to be significantly less than that. So that's great for people that are just getting into the space or have a smaller setup. I think that's fantastic. That price point, that's great for the industry. That is fantastic. Because we all talk about, especially on this channel, a lot of expensive gear, and a lot of some of the cheaper stuff just gets passed over. That RZ50, I think, is going to be a really, really good option for a lot of people. So I'm excited about that. These Weems, I think, are great options for people for just 2-channel setups. I used a power node, and that goes for all of these. Like I just said, the Sonos amp, the power nodes, these Weems, the SVS amps that they're doing, all of these are great options for 2.1 setups. I used a power node in my living room for a long time to drive Perlisten S7Ts, Martin Logan F200s. It didn't drive the Black Swans because the Black Swans are active and need 4 outputs and they need DSP. But it did phenomenally well, and it supports eARC, CEC, so it was very easy to control, had more than enough power for all of that. So if you're looking for something like a 2.1 setup, look into these types of devices. Again, Blue Sound power node, Sonos amp, Weem, the SVS. I don't remember what the SVS is called, but there's more and more people or manufacturers are getting these out into the market. The other great thing to them is that they're streamers. So you can directly connect to them in a lot of applications or stream to them. So if they don't support like Spotify Connect or Tidal Connect or any of that stuff, you can stream to them using AirPlay, Bluetooth, or over Wi-Fi. And it looks like Jonathan is joining us. Jonathan, I messed up. You can't hear me. Why can't you hear me? This is the danger.
I don't have sound.
Why?
I gotta figure out why I don't have sound. 1 second.
Jonathan joins and then just doesn't work. Can you hear me now? Nope. Now? No. How about now? Jonathan.
Talk to me.
You got me. Okay. What are you doing in your theater?
Oh, I've just been playing with karaoke stuff.
Oh, that's the karaoke stuff.
Yeah, it's still more of it.
I remember you talking to me about that briefly.
I'm sorry I'm late, but your thing said
no,
8.
I already said that I screwed up. That was all on me.
8?
No, I screwed that up. Because I told chat this already. I set this time in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 7 p.m. there set, which meant it was 8 p.m. here. So I screwed that up. That was definitely my fault. Chat, do our voices sound even? I changed some stuff.
Test
I'm
1,
betting
2.
they will.
Test 1, 2.
I had a auto gain setting turned off in my audio settings, and I'm thinking that that's probably why we didn't match.
In retro or in your Windows settings?
In Restream.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking that that's why all of this took place, or why the volumes were so far off. So I've fixed that. Any updates from you over the last week? I've been gone.
No, not really. We've been watching a little bit of Planet Earth, listened to some music.
Yeah.
We watched the first Lord of the Rings of the Rings of Power series or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Got back from camping on Friday.
The camper didn't burn down.
It didn't, but my dad broke his foot on the second day.
What is up with you guys in like
bad luck?
Bad stuff happening.
We were just hiking and he slipped and fell and he thought he sprained his foot. So he's like, we drove together. My folks came with us and he didn't really want to leave. So he just kind of hung around the campsite for the next 2 days and, like hobbled around a little bit, said he was hurt. We actually took him down to the place where he played in the water with a wheelchair at one point, but we borrowed from a shelter. So he played a little bit, but then he gets back and he goes to the doctor and they said he broke his tibia, like in several places. So he has to have surgery because it didn't get in. So that's not cool.
So you didn't break the camper.
I broke a bike. My daughter's bike.
I'm never going camping with you.
I was just pedaling. The gear shift wasn't working, or the Shimano shifter. Yeah. So I tried to switch gears while I was pedaling. I wasn't running it hard or anything, and it just snapped.
You rode your daughter's bike?
The 12-year-old. So it's like a 24-inch bike. It's not big enough for me. I look like a circus monkey, but
yes,
but a circus bear probably more appropriately. But it broke. I mean, like the little gear.
I wonder why it broke.
Just broke off.
You're as big as me. That would No. So I'm just imagining like you just pedaling normally and the internals of the bike, if it was anything living, are just screaming in agony because here's Jonathan he's like the bike's trying to protect itself, applying brakes, and you're just la la la, just and it burning through the brakes, gear shift, it's just disintegrating underneath you is what I'm picturing.
So we just left it there by the dumpster, which was sad. It was a nice Columbia bike, but no more. Other than that, it was pretty smooth. I mean, besides my dad.
Oh, yeah. My vacation was really smooth. I just broke a bike. Dad broke his foot. RV burned down. That's what I'm expecting you to tell me.
Yeah.
Was it fun at least?
Yeah, it was.
Actually. Did you laugh about the bike?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my daughter didn't laugh, but I mean, what else could you do? My wife said, you're too heavy for that bike. I said I wasn't even pedaling hard.
Did she tell you that before you got on it? Because
afterwards. After it wasn't. I told you so. It wasn't afterwards.
I can only imagine the mayhem that would have taken place if your wife told you that beforehand. Because my wife would have never let me live that down if that would have happened beforehand.
Yeah. My daughter's been a good sport about it. I told her we'd get her something different. We've been looking on Facebook Marketplace for a replacement.
That's good.
Yeah.
She gets a new bike.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I'm excited to hear about your stories here. I'm sorry I missed it. I'll have to.
You didn't really miss any. Well, let's go back and talk about the Sonys here a little bit, because I think that's really the only exciting one that you. Well, the Sony and the Onkyo. Okay, so here we go. Let's jump in here. Okay, so Bravia 9. Well, Bravia. So Sony has decided that they are going to rename the entire line of their video stuff to the Bravia series, right? So they announced the Bravia 9 was already out for the TVs. They got the Bravia 8 and the Bravia 7 now. They got 2 sound bars, whatever the Theater U is. I don't know what that is. I didn't see it. I didn't see the Bravia Theater quads. I think those are wireless subs. And then you've got the Bravia Projector 8 and the Projector 9. So the Projector 8 and the Projector 9 are updated versions of the 6000 and the 7000. They've got 4K 120, dynamic tone mapping. They have stupid low latency, and that's really it. And a little increase in brightness.
Stupid
So-
low latency. Are we talking like, because we are already at like JVC and Epson, we're at 20 milliseconds. I did see on AVS Forum they're supposed to be beating it. What are we talking? What kind of low
Like
latency?
10. So very, very low. Very, very, very low. So that's great. It's great for the industry. And that they went to 4K 120, that's a great option if you're a serious gamer. Absolutely. And you're wanting a projector. That's a
What
good
are their
one.
prices?
They kind of screwed that up.
Oh no! Everyone's screwing it up. They're all making it too high. I guess
Bravia
JVC's the
9
bargain entry now.
The Bravia 9 is $32,000.
Ryan, that's rough, man.
32.
I don't think your average consumer,
$1,000.
your average enthusiast even can like swing that. That's like
I don't know what they're
elite level
doing.
stuff.
I don't know what they're doing. Sony. Why? Why are you doing this? They all effectively went up like $2,000. The Bravia 8 and the
Three in
Bravia
the
9.
case of well, I mean, I don't know about across the board. I guess all the Sonys went up $3,000. You're saying, or $2,000.
Well, they didn't announce anything below the Bravia 8. So they both went up a couple $1,000s.
They still have the same chassis. It looks like from the picture.
Yep.
I kind of like the way that chassis looks.
Yeah, it's still lightweight, still good, but they got more expensive. I don't get it. But maybe there's supply chain stuff.
Not anymore, man. Everything I read says that's not the thing anymore. Like that was a thing, but not a thing anymore. Are you hearing different?
I don't know. I didn't hear anything. That was just a guess. I have no idea because I don't know why. I don't know why.
It's like this is one area in technology that as technology slowly improves, the price increases.
better?
Most areas of technology, right? The price goes down
That one's
year
better.
after year after year and cycle after cycle, generation after generation.
Yeah.
This and video cards. But video
Yeah.
cards haven't gotten as pricey as this kind of stuff yet.
Yeah.
You can still buy the best video card for gaming on the planet for $2,500 or whatever, you know?
They are slowly creeping up there, though. But they are, so on the video card thing, they are increasing in performance by leaps and bounds. Like, they're doubling a lot of times in performance.
Generation to generation.
And if they don't, people are kind of upset about it. So
I said this 10 years ago, and I think if NVIDIA ever like latches onto it, there's no reason NVIDIA can't charge whatever they want for their flagship stuff. In the same vein that these projector companies are doing this kind of thing. They want to make a $30,000 video card, people will buy it. Make it 10% faster than what the other product was. People will buy it.
Oh, yeah,
there's
they will.
money out there for it.
Well, they did when the dollar wasn't even, before inflation really took off. What were those, the big ones called that came out with the 1000 series?
Like the Titans and so
The
forth.
Titans, yes. They kind of did that with the Titans.
But they
And
were
people,
still like $1,500. But in a world
know.
where video cards cost $700 or $800
yes,
tops.
yes, that's what I meant. Is that when before inflation got to the point where it is now, yeah, they were like double the price of the next one. So, and people bought them.
I think that was exploratory, and
It was.
it worked. And I'm surprised they haven't just started cranking on the price, just ratcheting it up as they can. And I kind of heard rumors that the 5 Series might start going that direction.
Yeah.
When you
I
got to
hope
pay
not.
like $800 for a 60 Series card and stuff, or 70 Series card, it's getting kind of obnoxious. Anyway, we're off topic because I don't even know how many of our viewership is in the
I don't
gaming
know.
or video cards. But
I'm
that's
ready.
thing.
I'm ready for the new 5000. So anyway, so they got a lot more expensive. And what I saw in the demo, I told chat this earlier, that the demos at CEDIA, any demo done by a manufacturer is dangerous because you don't know how things are being set. You don't know what variables are being changed to create an image or a story that they want to tell you, right? So in this case, the Bravia 9 looked better than the 7000, but I don't know if that was created or fabricated. Like, is it really? It's a couple hundred lumens brighter. I didn't think it should have that much of a difference. If it does, in real world testing, that is great for the industry. Because if it really did what it did in comparison to the 7000, it's great for the industry. It's showed better than the 7000. But again, I don't know if that's true, right? Because they didn't show the settings. They didn't show like a calibration or anything like that. So who knows?
You may have already addressed this in your previous discussion with Sony, but someone in chat, Terhoya, is asking, and I'll show it here. He's asking, is the same processing?
Yeah, I answered that.
What's that story?
We don't know. So there's undefeatable processing in virtually every video display, regardless of what it is. A lot of people don't know about them, but there's a lot of processing. As an example, this is not related to motion, but did you know that let me just start here. Do you know where the saying, do not use an HDMI cable shorter than 2 meters on any input device came from?
No, but I have one that's like 1 foot, and I've used it, and nothing's caught fire yet. But it's voltage related, I assume, right? Overvolting it, perhaps?
So here's why. Several years ago, a certain manufacturer, and I will not name names, decided that they were going to put in an option for a low power mode for HDMI. Okay, where maybe it was a longer length and it didn't have the correct incoming signal intensity. Okay, option you could turn on and try and rectify that. Think of it like an EQ, effectively. Well, once one manufacturer saw this, they all started doing this. Then that option went away. But the setting stayed. You just can't change it anymore. So now all TVs have a low power mode that you can't change. And that's why they say don't use a cable lower than 2 meters or shorter than 2 meters, because you can oversaturate the input board on a display, or really any device like an AVR or a Pre or a Mad VR, anything. So that's why they say don't do that. There's ways around that, like you can vary gauge and stuff in the wire.
Make real small gauge.
Yeah, or like vary it, but it's things like that in the industry that manufacturers don't say anything about, and then it ends up causing problems because nobody has any idea that that's going on. And same thing is true for video. Like a motion smoothing setting. That's really everywhere in TVs, because if they didn't do it, it would look even worse. Like there are 300 lines of resolution on an OLED display. The reason plasma looked really so good is because it had 900 lines. And the more lines you have, typically the better the motion is going to be, because you got more lines of resolution. So a lot of them, because of how displays are now, have a level of undefeatable motion interpolation, at least on the LED and LCD and OLED displays, like TVs. I'm not sure. I honestly don't know about projectors, but this is just stuff that I think is, the more and more that happens, the more and more that the consumer is not aware of, the worse this can potentially become for the industry as a whole. So I don't know the answer to that, but I would hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised. Any questions, Jonathan, about the Sonys at all?
Were they in good rooms? Were you able to see them in like nice blacked out rooms, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, they were in dedicated theaters, blacked out with curtains and black walls. So they did do that. But the problem with these demos is you don't know when you're doing a comparison if it's really apples to apples, or if you're actually comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
So
what kind of screen were they using? What size, or generally speaking?
I think it was like a 135 or something
like
that.
High gain screen. Do you think it was like a Stewart or something?
I honestly don't know what it was, unfortunately. So, but that demo, the Projector 9 looked better than the 7000.
Did you happen to notice if they're using the same technology? I assume they are, since it's just like a 100 series revision instead of a whole new line by model. Is it PWM still? I assume so.
Yeah, I would assume so. I didn't ask. MW wants to know what kind of drugs they were on when they did the pricing so that he can take some. I mean, I don't blame him. $32,000. That's a lot. That is a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, it's truly a car, like a family car.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't say anything because of what's in the Mad VR Experience Center, but I'm in the industry. Like, I do this for a living, so I kind of have an excuse. That's a lot of money, man. And they
I
keep
mean,
going up.
just think of the world of TVs. Like the world of TVs, you can get a top of the line TV at Costco for a couple $1,000s. I mean,
Hmm.
if you don't need the biggest thing on the floor, easily a couple $1,000s.
Well, I think the
The top
Sony
of the
was
line projectors are
already.
30 grand.
I think the
And it's not
Sony
even
was
anything new.
already. The Sony
Yeah,
was already overpriced at $30,000. When you
exactly.
compare
Just
it to
think of
like the
a couple
JVC,
generations
that's
now.
26.
That's still a lot, but they're just
I
jumping
know
ahead
it's
by
a lot, but
thousands
it's
more. Yeah, yeah.
when you rule kind of the when you are kind of the de facto best. I think
That's
like what you were.
JVC's
I
title, don't
know
you think?
that
Yes.
that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. That when you are the de facto best, you kind of have a little more leeway to price. I think, like you brought up with the analogy with Nvidia, that when you are there, you kind of dictate what's going on for your flagship. You still typically want to be a little bit competitive, but
But
you
in
know what
this
I mean.
case, you're saying Sony kind of broke that rule because
Yeah.
they're commanding the higher
The
price.
well, so the hard thing about Sony, and this is what I think it's important for people to understand, is that Sony, in my opinion, I don't have any facts to back this up, but is the number one projector for dealers. Not that it's the best, but they have the best dealer programs. So they have the
In
best
real
dealer
talk,
support.
not from you, but from one of my other dealer friends, they kind of have the best margins for dealers, right? So it's not just programs; it's like
Mm,
margins. I
I
mean,
don't
I
know
don't know if
about
that's
that.
still true now, but a couple of years ago it was true, according to my other dealer friend.
I mean, maybe if you include like spiffs and stuff, maybe like a selling incentive and stuff, maybe. I don't really sell Sony, so I don't know. It's not because I think they're a bad company. It's just I've never historically done Sony. I could get them, but not direct. And buying through distributions quite different for products. Like I'm direct with Epson and JVC, and it's very different.
So you may have already addressed this too, but do they have any kind of tone mapping, dynamic tone
Yes,
mapping on the Sonys now?
yes.
They didn't before, so that's a big change,
Yeah, it
right?
is, and that may be why the Bravia 9 looks so much better than the 7000 because the
And nobody's just incorporating one of the well-known players in the industry like Lumagen or MadVR. Like
no,
none of
we
these
didn't.
projector companies are approaching that, I guess, huh?
Uh,
And
you
I'm
mean
not saying
quality
approaching it in quality.
wise?
No, I'm just saying like, do any of these vendors ever come to
Oh,
MadVR and say,
absolutely.
"Can we
Yes.
buy
Oh no,
an
they don't do that.
ASIC-based version of your
No,
MadVR to
no.
implement into our?" Why not? That seems like an easy avenue.
I think it's more complex than you think it is.
I'm sure, but if you built with their quantity of scale, with their manufacturing capability, you don't need a 4090 NVIDIA video card to do like, let's say 60% of what MadVR does.
Mhm.
I'm just throwing numbers out there. You could do some sort of custom programmed, inexpensive by volume ASIC, right? And then stick it on the projector and do, maybe don't have every
I
feature
agree.
that Envy has, but you have some core set of features that's much better than what they're in-house building.
Yes, but the flip side of that is you can focus on what you already do well, which is get an image to a screen, reproduce color properly, and then let an external video processor do everything else. You don't have to worry about it then. Because if you do something like that, it can potentially increase complexity quite a bit. So I'm just playing I don't know which way's right. I'm just saying that that's another option to do it. But so for anybody that doesn't know, I do work for MadVR. We do have several display manufacturers that did use us at CEDIA. There were several on the floor. And we didn't try and hide it. Like the display manufacturers didn't try and hide it. I think it's a lot of those display manufacturers have realized, like, why reinvent the wheel? Like, let these guys do what they do really well, and let the other guys do what they do really well. That's really it. Anything else on Sony?
I'm not sure if you're caught up on comments. I'm seeing some comments in here.
I'm starring things as we go, but if it's Sony specific, bring it up.
Nothing off the top. So I see the TVs and the projector. Someone mentioned LED walls. Did anything like that exist under the Sony name, or even?
There was a Sony LED wall.
How did it look? And what kind of pricing are we talking on those kinds of things?
So let's talk about LED walls in general. Let me see if I can find. Let me turn some of these tabs off. Let's turn that off. Turn that off. Close tab. Close tab. I'm just closing things that I've already talked about. We'll talk about this next. So LED walls. Do I have any up here? Yes. Here we go. Okay, so here's the LED walls. This is an LG with a 1.5 millimeter pixel pitch. They're getting cheaper. There's AWOL had several. LG was out, Sony was out, Barco's was out, Just Video Walls was out. The common denominator here was you could get like 160 some inches for like $100,000 installed. So they're getting cheaper. Now
so how does that rival something like your Christie projector that you have that's in the same ballpark as far as pricing? Because you have a 160-inch screen as well. I mean, that's like apples to apples, sort of, kind of.
It is. I think there's some compromises here that
on
I don't
both sides, I'm sure, but
there
let's
are.
talk through them.
There absolutely are. So for like the wall size, and I don't remember if it was 160 or I think it was 160. Remember that an LED wall, the resolution is dictated by the size because each panel has a de facto number of pixels. And then the pitch dictates the distance between each one of those pixels. Okay? So the larger the pitch number, the larger the distance is between each pixel. The smaller the pitch number, the less distance and the finer the resolution.
And this results itself in like screen door effect, right?
Yes.
How you have to be pretty darn close with that kind of pitch.
You do. You absolutely do. And you and I have talked about this before, that resolution is something that should not be high on the priority list, right? It's something that if you're far enough away, you're not going to be able to see. So
from seating distances.
Yes.
Typical.
So in these applications like this, the typical resolution on a 1.5 pixel pitch wall at 160 inches is going to be in the neighborhood of a horizontal resolution of like 2300. I don't know what the vertical resolution is at that point, but do the math because it's the same ratio as 4K, so you could figure it out. So that's 1.5. 1.2 is like 2800 pixels horizontally. And then as you go up, the more pixels per panel. So with a 1.2 or 1.4 or 1.5, you have to have a certain number of panels to have something like native 4K. At 1.2, it's like an 8x8 if we use the Barco for an example. So this wall at $100,000, this LG one at a 1.5 millimeter pixel pitch is something like 2800 horizontal resolution. It still looked pretty good. But the problem with a lot of these walls is heat generation. They generate a lot of heat. A lot of heat. And how you deal with that, HVAC, they take a lot of power. They are not simple to install. Depending on the wall, like taking the Barco as an example, which is this one. I know you can't really tell anything about it. But this one uses a 1.2 millimeter, and it's $100,000. I don't know how Barco did this. Barco historically is very expensive, right? They're a premium product. They exist in commercial theaters, and their entry-level projectors like 40 grand for the Bragi. And then they go all the way up to the Nerthus that was in the Trinov room this year that's $250,000 that weighs 300 pounds and is the size of a small car that we had to put on a stand. I had to help do this with a forklift. So, like you've seen the Griffin in the Mad VR Experience Center, right?
Sure. And I saw the Barco one at the M-Wave event too.
You didn't see the Nerthus.
Okay.
That was the Nord. The Nerthus, if you take the Griffin, do it 2.5 times for size, that's the Nerthus. It's enormous. Now, it puts out the same amount of light, 36,000 ISO lumens to like 32,000 ANSI lumens. But they're a premium product. For Barco to release this at $100,000 with a 1.2 pitch, I was not expecting that. And it looked really good. It looked really good. Now, I didn't stand in front of it and critique it or measure it or do anything like that. But given that it's related to the Bifrost, which is it's a phenomenal wall, but it's way more expensive. It's really good. The problem with it in comparison to something like the Bifrost that's more expensive is this, and this is the same for all of these cheaper walls, they statically attach to the wall. So they're a lot more of a pain in the ass to get aligned and to get right. And there's a lot more variables for error.
Statically?
Like, so on the really expensive walls, you're able to make fine adjustments after the panel. Each individual panel is in the wall. Where these, you have like static, horizontal, think like...
you're not talking about like
hat channel.
Static. You're not talking
No, like installing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you have like a hat channel and then the wall attaches to it. And if that's not perfect, you just may notice more seams. It really comes down to a seam thing. But MW, go ahead.
How good are the borders around each of the panels now? Are they indistinguishable from any distance away, or as you get closer, can you tell where those panels come together, or how
if you're right up on, yeah, you can tell, but can you see them in that?
No, not at all.
Black image, full black image, maybe from a seating distance.
Why do you say black image? I would intuitively think white image would be.
I mean, maybe. Well, I'm just because I didn't see any white, and like with them off is when I typically notice them, because you're not typically seeing an all white scene.
Is it because there's some sort of reflective difference between where the spacing is?
Think like a elevation variation or any type of pit, like gap or anything like that. You can just see it. So
on its face, that doesn't sound very good, man. But you're saying, like, how far back do you have to be before you won't see that anymore? Like in your regular content, is it just like a few feet, or is it 6 feet, or 10 feet?
Like if the content's on a couple feet, you won't see it.
Okay.
I mean, if it's an all black scene, you may notice it, but it's like what I tell people with Mad VR, where we're talking about nonlinear stretch. You may notice the stretch for that second, and then you're going to forget about it. Like, it's not something that takes you out of it. It's just a compromise of the cheaper walls. And even on the expensive ones, you can potentially see it, just not while content's playing. Absolutely not. The seams are hard to see, and they're getting harder and harder to see. But all of the walls were super cool. They're getting way, way cheaper. I remember when these first came out, and they were like $5 zillion. They were really expensive. But back to the compromises, heat, and you're married to it.
I want to ask you about the heat thing, because this I'm going to maybe poke you a little bit. How many watts maybe you don't even know, and that's fair. But I've always heard they're very hot. But your projector uses like 4,000 watts potentially.
It does, but the projector doesn't heat my room. That we've noticed. This wall, because I've been in rooms with these walls, absolutely heats the room. Just because of how it's passive cooled. Like the projector has liquid cooling. Like it cools itself.
Well, that's only if you're using it for a short period of time, because a watt, just in its face, a watt is a measurement of heat. Like, yeah, it's a unit of heat measurement.
So potentially, if I had like the projector with no inlet or outlet, I could potentially heat it up. But
if you ran it for hours on end because you have to heat up the water.
Here's an experiment.
You saturated it.
Here's an example. If I go up behind the projector and I'm putting my hand around it, the air coming off of it, even if I've been watching it for a while, is still relatively ambient. If I go up in front of these walls and put my hand in front of it, it is hot. Like how much heat is getting put off of these. Imagine it like a old school plasma and how much heat those things put off. That's similar to this. Over a large surface area, and it's really warm.
I had a 65-inch plasma in the living room, and when you walked
I still
by,
have one.
You would feel the heat on your arm.
They are warm. So it's just, in my experience, this is just what I've had here. I mean, we've got a Griffin here. I've never noticed the room heating up, even having them on for several hours.
You need to run a watt meter on that thing and see how much you're actually pulling, because my expectation is because watt is a measurement of heat, you're not using, if you're not feeling the heat in the room and it's not saturating the room, it's not doing 4,000 watts. Maybe because you run at 30% brightness or whatever.
Probably,
Maybe it's
absolutely.
much, much, much less.
Yeah, but you're not ever going to do that on these. So and you're married to it. Like, how do you undo this? It is your wall. It is the wall. Like, it's the stuff that you have to do to install these is not simple. I mean, it's part of the infrastructure of your house. It's super cool. And I think the installation's getting more simplistic, but you're married to a wall. You date a projector.
So they've kind of been talking about these walls and showcasing these walls for a decade, right? Do you know, like, did you have any installer talk of people that actually have these installed in clients' homes? Is this still kind of like a prototype type technology, or are people actually using it?
Oh, people use these.
Are installers installing them?
Yes.
Okay, just for the uber wealthy type clientele, huh?
Yes. Well, I deal with dealers probably once a week that have a Mad VR on a video wall.
Really?
Oh, some of them are on ridiculous walls. I think the largest one I've heard of in a home was like 50 feet wide.
That's wild. I mean, that's literally like professional commercial cinema type size.
That was in a garage.
Oh, and it's in my garage.
Yeah. MW, I know the install is much easier, but there's stuff on your wall. It's not as easy as a projector. So they're getting easier, and I'm glad that they're still working this way. But the other problem with them is they're not acoustically transparent. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about. I don't have a picture of this one, so I'll just leave this one up. Sound Room 3, and we can talk about immediately Sound Room 4. We'll just talk about all the sound rooms because I don't have any pictures of them. Sound Room 3 was Ascendo, Christie, Mad VR, Movia, Kaleidoscape, Storm were the manufacturers. And I'm actually going to get rid of this image for now so you can see our big faces. There you go. So that was Sound Room 3. Sound Room 3 had Ascendo's Director. So the Director is a speaker designed to be used with video walls. So it sits up above the screen, LCR, and uses a ribbon tweeter at a specific angle and then supporting woofers to create a thrown sound field that is perceived to be inside the video wall. I think they did a great job. That room, I think, sounded great. I still wouldn't do it because now that I've gone acoustically transparent, and Jonathan's probably laughing inside his head, like, I told you to do that a long time ago, you dummy. Because I was all hard bent on keeping my Martin Logans in the room. I couldn't go back to what it is now. I can't imagine having speakers in front of the screen. But if you're doing a video wall, I think they are, in my opinion, I've heard a lot of these solutions, like the speakers that try and do this to get around this compromise of not having acoustically transparent screens. I think they are the best at what they do.
Was it open demos, or were they having some specially crafted stuff that was in a loop that you couldn't navigate out of?
I mean, it was just like stuff on Kaleidoscape. It wasn't anything special.
That's good, at least, right?
Yeah.
If they're not, because sometimes magic stuff like that falls apart when you go to real world content. Like they have specially crafted stuff and it doesn't work with everything.
So in a lot of the sound rooms and stuff, they played concerts off Kaleidoscape. There were movie clips and stuff. There wasn't content that they specifically designed for that. It was like The Police off Kaleidoscape, or there was another one. They played Imagine Dragons, which you've seen. They did Top Gun. I mean, all that stuff. So it just sounded like a normal home theater experience. They did a good job. So the other thing that was new that was in there was Ascendo has come out with a 16-inch passive sub. This thing is small. Like imagine a 16-inch sub where the cabinet is like the size of the woofer. So it actually measures about 17 inches because of how they did the cone, the outside of the cone. I think they're good for the sound of the driver, or for the size of the driver. Obviously, you have limitations because of the size and the cabinet size, but they're designed for a small application. So that was cool. The Movia seats were fantastic, but they're also on the same price range, if not more than Sonique. So, and Sonique ain't cheap, but they're custom. So it's like anything you would want to do in a seat, they could do. They had IP control, which for a demo was awesome because the person giving the demo just said, all right, we're going to go. And he said, watch your bags. And then he put everybody's seat up. So it was like you're getting prepared for the experience, like you're getting ready to launch. So that was super cool. I mean, people are going to think, oh, well, that's kind of dumb. But when you're in the demo and that happens, it's just another level to the immersion. Like you're getting ready for the experience. So I liked them. Those were cool. What else was in there? That room had the M4K25 projector, which looked great. Didn't really have any complaints. Was running on the Strato V, so Kaleidoscape's new player. They were just playing the movies directly off of it without a Tera. What else? Was there anything else in there that I'm missing aside from the Storm? But we've talked about Storm. Storm always does great stuff. Don't think there was anything else in that room. The room next door was the same stuff again. Didn't have a Mad VR, had a Lumigen. It had a Christie Griffin, so same projector that's in the Mad VR Experience Center. The Movia chairs used 12 28-inch square subwoofers, and then it used the Black Swans, the 10s or the 6 Pros everywhere else. And then it had the Movia chairs and Seymour. I know the screen in this one was a Seymour Enlighter Pro. So the Screen Excellence Enlighter Pro. So the thing that everybody's going to want me to talk about in this room is the 28-inch sub. So the 28-inch sub, do I have a picture of that? Is it? There it is. So let's check this out. This guy. Boom. There she is. 28-inch subwoofer. It weighs almost 300 pounds. Has 4 voice coils. One in, I'm assuming, each corner, because since it's a square, it doesn't have a ton of excursion. This thing's mid bass is insanity. It'll play decently flat. For any subwoofer being flat up that high is really hard. Up to 600 hertz. So not only will you hear it, it'll play it loudly at 600 hertz. Some of the compromises, though, for a square sub, lack of excursion, which then means because we don't want to over-excurge the driver, because we don't want to impart distortion, it doesn't dig as deep as something like a 32 with the circular driver. But it did really well. This thing is only 12 inches deep.
Oh.
Which is insane.
Space either, right?
No. And for the amount of volume that it's pushing out, let me see if I'm not going
to something that easily fits behind a baffle wall.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So this was designed for waveforming. That's what this subwoofer was designed for. Like being able to put a bunch of them up front and behind, and there were 12 of them in this room. Not ideally spaced. They were facing into the room, not like across from each other. How my front subs used to be, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the 28? I know there it is. I'm not going to share this, but I can tell you like what its maximum output is. So its maximum output is at 80 hertz, 140 dB. And it just, how far up is it flat? So then at...
Is this compression sweeps you're looking at, or just like a sine sweep?
Like it's a compression sweep.
How's it handle down low? They're just not made for down low, or does it do
So it handles down low. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know how much of that I'm supposed to share.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say that it did very, very well. It
With
has
so many of them, probably
yeah,
especially.
it has some compromises because of the way it was designed. Like there's no free lunch with anything in home theater or anything in life. There is always a give and take.
Mm-hmm.
Always. So in this case, it can excurge and you're just going to run into problems potentially down low. Now, the caveat to this is Jeffrey told me that this thing has so much output that they were actually worried about the clipple that it was being measured on and blowing up the microphone. So I don't know if they cut it short. So I don't know how accurate the measurements I have are, because looking at the measurement, I don't see any. Normally, I see like levels of compression. Like I can see that it went here, and then that measurement stops, so they had to drop it down. I don't see any of that on this. So I don't know, which is another reason why I don't want to talk about its low end stuff, because I don't know how accurate it is. But the room sounded great. Don't really have any complaints. With 12 of them, I had to move them. It was not fun. It's like, imagine me or you in a 28-inch by 12-inch box and having to stack 3 of them on top of each other in each corner. It was not a fun experience.
Yeah, 300 pounds a piece. That's not lightweight.
It was not a fun experience. And I got to do that after helping move 14 per listen D2 15s. Yeah. MW, can it be flat to 10 hertz at 110 dB? I don't know that any sub outside the 50 can do that, or the 80. That's a lot of power at 10 hertz. Well, I guess the Captivator gets close. What is it? 107, 108?
It's in that ballpark, 104, something like that, off the top of my head. But you can maybe make it with room gain, with boundary gain, because those measurements are taken outside usually.
Absolutely, anechoically, yeah, for sure. Now MW does bring up a good point. That sub's 30 grand.
128's 30 grand.
Well, yeah.
Man, this is a different sphere. These shows.
Well, it's not. So not all the equipment is that high. This is just what we're talking about right now. We'll change gears and talk about the SVS, SB, and PB17 here after this. But yeah, that's 30 grand, and that's without the amplifier. So they're expensive, but they are beautifully made. Like that's a full-on carbon fiber woven front. I mean, it's custom designed by Ascendo, by Jeffrey, and it's a work of art. It's a really pretty and well-made sub. How much power do you need for an Ascendo 60-inch sub? Jeffrey was telling me, and this is burst, this is not sustained, that they sent this sub, one of these subs, 36,000 watts, and it was fine. So, obviously, if you sustain that, that could potentially be a problem, but it's the same guy pricing these that's pricing Sony. Yeah, but so Easy Tech says these prices are wild. So this is a lot of times what happens when you chase the percentage points. Things start getting really, really, really expensive when you go down that pathway. Plus, they are not internet direct. They are sold only through dealers and a select few dealers. So it's not just the company selling direct to the consumer. So there's other factors at play. What else was in that room? Let's go down the hall because I think we talked about that room. Anybody else want to hear anything about that room? Black Swan sounded great. Jeffrey did a new DSP on them. I'm excited for that. Next room was Absolute Ultimate and Alcons. So they did a Christie 4K 15, Alcon speakers, Mad VR, Kaleidoscape. I'm not a huge fan subjectively of take this off because we've already talked about it. I'm not a huge fan subjectively of Alcons. Just I don't like the way they sound. So that's a subjective opinion. Everything else about the room was great. Expect good things from the Christie. Expect good things from the Mad VR. So don't really have much to say there. Next room was Dyna Audio. Nothing really exciting. Wasn't awful, but nothing really exciting.
When you say nothing really exciting, are these like much more simple setups compared to?
I didn't know anything. I don't know anything about Dyna Audio, and nobody really gave us a spiel about what it was, so I don't really have any. I don't know.
I guess I'm just saying, since I've never been to CEDIA yet, when you go room to room to room, is it like comparably priced type installs, or are these rooms like as dramatic as day and night? Like some are $10,000 rooms versus $500,000 rooms.
All over the place. There's no set way or set standard for any of these to be done.
Are they arranged by price tiers by like area, or it's just like you could have the bargain?
So imagine that you've got the sound rooms are all together. So there's 7 sound rooms, and there are rooms that are provided by Emerald, who's the runner who runs the CEDIA show, and then they build inside of the the manufacturers build inside these rooms, right? So then other companies have their own sound rooms that they've built that are not provided by Emerald. So these are just these 7 that are sitting over here all together. So there was a Dyna Audio one, and then the next one was, what was the next one? I think I skipped one that I didn't go in, and the last one was PSC Audio, Storm, and JL Subs, and it was good. Didn't have any infra, but they were using in-wall subs, so that was a limitation. That was actually using a Christie 860, which is their entry-level piece. That street price is like $10K or something like that, and it did really, really well. It was on a gray screen, so it's a single-chip DLP with like 1500-to-1 native contrast, but on the gray screen, it had enough contrast that it did okay. 7,500 lumens. What is the constructions of these rooms like? It's like wood soundboard with insulation and a bunch of other stuff in it. And then the inside of every room that I really wasn't too much of a fan of is like an inch thick of like acoustic foam. So you're just attenuating all of your mid-high frequencies, which I don't know why they did that. Because if your speaker can't boost past that, you're in trouble, right? You're just cutting all of that out. So that was it for the sound rooms. Storm had a great showing. I don't think Trinov was over there. I don't think they were in any of those rooms. Storm killed it. They did really, really, really well. They showed all of their stuff. They were in probably 4 of those rooms, and they had a great showing. Let me look at some of these questions. So Richard, going back to that power question, asked, how much power would you need for a 60-inch sub? The 50 in the MadVR Experience Center has 10,000 watts to each of its 2 voice coils. The 32 will do 105 dB at, I think, 2 meters at 5 hertz, or 1 meter, I think, at 5 hertz. And the 50 has, I think, over double its surface area and the same amount of excursion. So a lot. And it could definitely take more than 20,000 watts. But I don't need any more because my house would fall apart. Like my foundation would disintegrate. There's enough sub energy in that room that the floating clouds, they're on cables, are literally doing this as the sub energy is coming back and forth. There's a lot of energy. The rest of the room's fine, but it's 8,000 pounds of OSB. So and you look behind you a lot of times, and the 50's like not even moving, and you have to go up and touch it. Like, is this thing even on? It's definitely on. Mm-hmm. Chris asks, Ryan, when you cruised the aisle at CEDIA, what were your personal best of show video displays you ran across? Ooh. I don't know. Let me think on that. I don't really have a good answer to that. Should we talk about SVS?
Sure.
We need to talk about SVS. Where is SVS? SVS. There it is.
I'm going to put up a question from the audience here. Ryan B. asked about the PB17 that they've been advertising.
That is what we're going to talk about. There we go. No. There we go. I was zooming in the wrong window. Okay. So here is the SVS. This is the 17 that everybody's been talking about. I don't know how I feel about this. There's a lot of marketing around this, and it feels like marketing, right? They say that it gets down to like 8 hertz. My problem with that is at what SPL? Because I wrote a post about this. My phone speaker can get to 2 hertz, but you'd have to be an ant inside the speaker in order to get that. So you could say a speaker can do whatever you want, but if you don't provide the SPL, it's meaningless. Would you agree?
I haven't even seen a spec sheet for it yet.
There is no spec sheet.
That box size, as I'm seeing there, doesn't look like it would support 8 hertz.
No.
It's not big enough. It's just not big enough to be port tuned there. If they're talking about like with incredible room gain, both ports plugged, maybe as in the sealed mode, maybe they'll hit 8 hertz. It's quasi flat, but I bet it's like it's down significantly by 8 hertz.
Oh yeah. So this isn't us saying that it's not going to hit 8 hertz. It's that it's not going to hit 8 hertz at what any of us think is meaningful in any way. Like it,
right?
Just not going to do it.
Right. I mean, SVS. I like SVS. I think they're a good product, but I agree with you on their marketing. It's been ratcheted up in the last few years, like diamond encrusted tweeters and all the stuff with this last speaker round. I don't remember what it's called, but the speaker that has kind of the concave aspect on the front end. There's a lot of marketing kind of
that speaker where they took all of their lines and just put them into one line, and then that was it. That speaker, their speaker naming is confusing.
I like SVS. I think they're a good product and a good price, and it's a reliable brand. It's been around for 20 years, but they are pretty hot on the marketing lately.
Yeah.
Some of the
and just these videos that have been releasing from them, there's a lot of marketing speak, and
you can tell it's a quality driver. I mean, look at the magnet structure on that thing, and the surround is beefy, and they usually handle a lot of power. They're very reliable type things. They have nice phone integration. Like their subwoofers are nice subs.
Just say what it is, though. Don't do this marketing. People will respect you more for being truthful. That's my opinion. This whole thing about we're going to say that it does this, and I will eat my words if I'm wrong. I will admit if I am wrong, but the odds of that happening are very, very low.
It's just not a big enough box. That's just not how it works, right?
No. And I don't think that's anywhere. I don't think it's going to do that at any meaningful volume.
You know, there's interesting that they make it a 17-inch size because it's kind of uncommon. The 16 was uncommon. The 17 is uncommon. It's almost like when I was in high school, there was a Russian pole vaulter that used to beat the world record by an inch at a time, or fractions of an inch at a time, even though he could do more than that, because every time he beat the world record, he got a sizable amount of money. Got exposure and got publicity and all that kind of stuff. I wonder, it's almost like SVS is kind of doing that too. They kind of have been creeping up using non-traditional sizes, and there's no reason they couldn't go to an 18 or 21. People have been demanding it from them. When at M-Wave, I heard multiple people asking about that. When are you going to release an 18-inch or a 21-inch subwoofer? they're just kind of creeping up at their own pace. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of interesting. Like this Ultra Revolution as a 17, it's 1 inch bigger than your previous flagship. It's not going to be that much difference in performance unless your box is huge. Really?
I mean, they do have dual voice coils now.
Yeah, but that doesn't really speak to the performance. I mean, you can
I
have a
know.
single voice coil and a dual voice coil, and it won't really matter unless you're trying to change the impedance of the driver or something. Like it doesn't mean one will perform better than the other. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see some performance specs on it. I'm sure we'll get it from Audioholics or somebody that does some of the outside measurements and ground plane measurements and see where it lands.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect it to be a bad product. Don't get us wrong. We're not saying that.
But I do think, I went back through and looked at that Audioholics comparison where they compared like 15 of the most common subs in this price range. And the SVS 16, the SB and PB were not recommended. They were okay, but their group delay was not great.
Mm-hmm.
It was all over the place. And when you compared it to the Klipsch kicked butt, which is kind of shocking when you think about the history of Klipsch subwoofers.
Mm-hmm.
But the measurements that were shown, and I do trust James, the measurements that were shown spoke for themselves. So take that for what it is. Hopefully it's a great sub. I'm sure it will be. More competition in the industry. So anything else on that one?
No, but there are some comments here. What frequency is meaningful? Would you be happy with 12 hertz? Ryan B asks. And I think he's the one that kind of was introducing the question. So here's his follow up. Like he's saying, all right, so it doesn't do 8 hertz. I'll take you at your word. What is meaningful? What do you think is appropriate for home theater? It's always kind of a standing question.
I mean, honestly, I think most people would be happy with 20. Hell, most people would probably be happy with 25 or 30. Once you experience the lower stuff, though, it's difficult to go back. So
I kind of think the magic, in my opinion, it's like 16 hertz. And I think, in my opinion, it's because that's where I hear. So if I do test tones and I'm dropping them 1 hertz at a time, 16 is where my hearing drops off. So if I can't hear it, I already have feel covered. If I can't hear it, I don't care about it.
But for the general populace, where would you say?
That's going to be individually unique because I've tested a lot of people in my theater with that same test. I've had a guy hear as high as 28 hertz, that was where his hearing stopped. A lot of people are in the 20 hertz range. That's kind of where that falls out because that's where most humans are. Mm-hmm. I've heard somebody I had in over here could hear all the way down to 11 hertz. So I mean, it's gonna depend on your individual ears. But I think you should be able to, isn't it nice to be able to hear every note that you can actually hear, like be able to reproduce every note you can actually hear?
Yeah.
But if you're going to talk about the infrasonics of it or the pressure wave feel of it, you have to take, I mean, it's no longer talking about 1 or 2 subs. You're talking about 8 or 16 of them to get the pressure feel from the lower frequencies. And I'm not sure to most people that's worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
My point with this is all like, what is good enough for the average consumer?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can say
16 that is where I'm at. That's my landing. You said 20, 30?
Well, I'm saying
30.
I'm saying 20 to 30 for Joe Schmo, not for our audience. Yeah, I'd probably say 16 to 18 is probably where most people would be very happy. I think it's once you experience that lower stuff, the lower dig is hard to go back.
Yeah, hard to not want it anymore.
Yeah, especially ones that are properly done, phase, alignment, not just the frequency response. It's difficult to go back, for sure. Any other questions you wanted to jump on before we?
No, MW called me out for something. He says dual voice coil reduces inductance. I thought I said impedance, and if I didn't, that's what I meant to say. Like you can change your impedance, your ohm rating,
sure,
with different amount of voice coils. Inductance, I don't know. I can't speak to that. It might be different wiring sizes and so forth that would speak to that. Different size wire.
Talked about.
I don't know. That's a little bit beyond my pay grade.
Let's do this one. Onkyo. I talked about this earlier, but we've had enough people on here that I think it's important. RZ30 got announced. So street price, or the minimum advertised price, is $11,999. Probably be selling for significantly less than that. It's 9.2, so 9 speakers, 2 subs. They say 1100 or 1000. Jesus, 100 watts per channel, 1,000 watts per channel. Good God. Looks to be very similar to the RZ50, just a smaller brother or smaller relative.
I'm glad to see options, in this world.
For sure.
I was looking up the Denon 3800 back to just kind of see how the backs compared.
This one will have Dirac live room correction. And we'll have upgrades available for Dirac live bass control. And has the normal complement of supported codecs and wireless streaming. And can do distribution with Sonos, which is also very cool.
I'm really surprised they have a component video on there still. Look at that, red, green, and blue.
That is shocking.
Nothing's used that in 10 years that I've owned.
Maybe it was just because we could.
Right? Like I used to run component. Everyone used to run component like that. But
oh, sure. But I remember hooking my Xbox 360 up via component.
Sure.
The launch systems, then they all went to HDMI. Any more questions on that one?
No, not for me.
TCL, big TVs. So they showed a 150-inch QD mini LED. I didn't spend much time with this one. It looked pretty good at a distance. I really didn't get right up on it, but it's $20,000. And to me, for that price point, I'd probably rather have the LG G497. That's personal preference, though.
How about are these things off axis? That's kind of the gripe of these kind of TVs, isn't it?
When I was looking at it and I was walking by it, I did make that observation, and it wasn't great.
Yeah, I've noticed that on the shows as you're sitting on the outside peripheral or moving across the room, it really changes the colors.
I think it looked good head on, but it was playing specifically curated content that I think any display would look really good head on with. And then as I got off axis, you could tell it was deteriorating. But it's cool. Like the fact that a 115-inch TV is $20,000. I mean, you remember when the 100-inch LEDs were launching and they were like $60,000, $100,000. Now their mini LED is for 115 inches is 20. I mean, we're making progress.
There's a question in the pinned comments I'm going to bring up here from MW.
Compare the Sony PJ to the TCL 115. I don't think I could lose acoustically transparent. What about you? We're bordering on.
I mean, we've had this kind of conversation before. If it was a 120-inch OLED, I would switch.
What's the price point that you would need for that?
Way cheaper than it is. We're talking like $5,000 or something, maybe $8,000, something like that. That makes it in my wheelhouse. I wouldn't pay $30,000 for a Sony projector. What's this TV cost? What'd you say it was?
20.
I mean, so you got way brighter nits on this. If you're sitting on angle in front of this, your HDR experience is going to be a million times better on this than the Sony.
I mean, what did they say? Like 6,500 nits?
I don't even know.
Or something like that.
That seems way too high, doesn't it? 6,500?
I think that's what it is.
That's a lot.
It is.
And a projector like that Sony flagship is probably putting 150 on your screen. 6,500 seems high, but if it's that versus 150,
I'm pretty sure that's what I remember. I mean, the TVs and stuff are getting kind of ridiculous.
20,000 dimming zones.
Chat, correct me here. Somebody told me at the show, respectable source, that it was 6,500 nits.
That's wild.
That's really bright. I mean, you saw in the Experience Center
Yeah.
Somewhere between, I don't know what it was, somewhere between 700 and 1,000 on a 160-inch screen.
Yeah, it's
And
like
that
you're
was like
standing in
being
a car
outside.
headlight. It's like standing in a car headlight on the
But
reflected light.
I think the difference there, though, is that I don't think the experience is the same for reflected light as directly illuminated or emitted. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and I would assume that the 6500 nits isn't like every pixel can be white. It's probably meant for specific highlights and so forth.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's like 10% window or something like that. That may make sense. I don't know. That'd be cool, though. I'd want to experience that.
I really think, like, if you only could have one of the two, and the acoustic transparent screen has its own merits that Ryan's mentioned, that's for sure. But I think this would just blow away the projector as far as like,
video quality, absolutely.
like if you're wanting to watch a nature documentary or a football game, or pick your thing. The Expanse, like it's going to beat this Sony across the board, is it not? Is it not? The only thing was
picture quality, yes.
Off angle might be the only thing it wouldn't beat the Sony at.
K for Constant says the TCL 115 uses the same backlight as the new Bravia 9. I mean, the Bravia 9 is regarded as one of the best TVs out there. So if that's the case, that's a pretty good tick in the thing for TCL. Okay.
You got some comments coming up in the same kind of vein.
I would rather get 100. Oh, yeah. At 120 inches, yes, I would agree with that because you have room for the speakers outside of it. It makes sense. In my situation and in my experience, once you pass a certain size, I don't think I could do a video wall anymore. And I think there's a different video experience with a projector than there is with a direct view. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, people certainly say that, but I don't know that I am of the nature that I say I wouldn't ever move to a TV. Like, I read that on the forums practically every day. Somebody says, like, I like reflected light image. There's something about it that seems like an old cinema. It's nostalgic, and I don't ever want to move to a TV. I hear that. I don't think I agree with that, but I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, you may be coming there anyway, but Richard says, what do you think about the LG 97-inch OLED? I mean, at a show like this, it's almost impossible to compare like a mini LED in a bright environment against an OLED. The OLED's advantages won't show up in that kind of environment, right?
I think the LG G4 97 is the best display of that size out there. I don't know anything that can beat it. Mm-hmm. We used at the MadVR booth, we were using the LG G2 97 because they didn't have any G4s available. The G2 and the G4, all of them use the same panel. They just have different processing. Its price point right now is the G4 is $25,000 USD. I think it's the best TV at that size out of all of them. I mean,
and they didn't have anything bigger than 97 at CEDIA for OLED?
No.
Is that coming? Are they just, what are they doing?
I think it's panel size because they haven't made it to a processing methodology that allows them to get bigger. So $25,000 for an LG G4 OLED. I mean, phenomenal display. They're great. Got some customers with them. Perfect blacks, big screen. You sit close enough to it, it's pretty good. None of the compromises and stuff that you're going to have necessarily. I mean, there are some, but it's going to crush that mini LED. Doesn't have 6,500 nits though. That's pretty bright. All right, it's time. Epson. So Epson released 3 projectors. The QB1000, which is this guy, the 3000, and the 7000. I talked about this previously when we were talking about the Sony projectors. These, to me, did not show well. The QB1000, measurement-wise, because I've talked to some people that have measured them, I think is going to be a good projector. My only problem with it is I think it is only marginally better than the LS12000. Because you're paying, what is it, $8,000 for 3,300 lumens.
Which is a 22% increase over the LS12000, but a larger, like 40% price increase.
Yes.
Right?
Now, it does have dynamic tone mapping. Which,
did you see that in action? Could you pause there for a second? In all the videos that I saw, and I was trying to search them out on YouTube, they had these things in like bright rooms, didn't they? Was there any place to view them in a dark room?
So they did, but that room did not show well. I don't know why. It just didn't do well. So let's stay in the bright room for a moment. So Epson had two different rooms. They had the QL 7000 on one screen, the QL 3000 on one, and then they had this, like, you may have seen a picture of it. They had this ultra short throw QL 3000 lens, because these are all detachable lenses. Like, you can change all the lenses.
There's like 10 or 15 different lenses.
They have a bunch, which is really cool. And there's a lot of functionality that you can gain from that. But I think, personally, they're just, and I don't know this, so take this with a grain of salt. It just seems like these projectors, the QLs, not the QB, the QLs are rebranded commercial and repackaged commercial projectors, because they don't have the contrast. If I had to guess, LS12000's what, like 5,000 to 1 native?
Yes.
Somewhere in there?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's, I think, perfectly satisfactory. For most people's operation, it's decent enough. I've never had a problem with it. The QLs, I would probably say, are somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000.
On the spec sheet, they are 3,000 to 1 advertised native on the 7,000, and I haven't seen a spec sheet for the 3,000 yet, but you could probably assume logically
they're probably
3,000 to 1 or something.
They're probably 3,000. That sounds about right. And the reason I say it's probably is because Epson has been going after a lot of display manufacturers for not being truthful. So I would expect that Epson is being truthful in these. Otherwise, they're not walking the walk. So I'm guessing they're being truthful. 3001 sounds about right. It wasn't anything that blew me away. I mean, it's the LS12000 for $5,000. All of those lower priced Epsons have always dominated the market, and rightfully so. Would you agree? I mean, they've been great performance for the money.
Yeah, somebody put in chat, and I don't have it real handy, but he just basically said, look, the 5050 UB that came out in, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago for $3,000, and now it's like 2,500, 2,000 range. It still throws a really darn good picture, and it's so cheap compared to other options in this field.
It does. So the LS12000, its big drop is it doesn't have tone mapping or dynamic tone mapping. It's kind of, tone mapping kind of sucks. They have dynamic.
So the QL series don't have the same tone mapping you're saying?
No, I'm saying the LS12000 had it. The QB and QL have it, but how they were shown, it wasn't a great demo. One positive that I have from them is they were super quiet. I mean, like, unbelievably quiet. You could be under them and they were on, and I could barely hear them. So that's a win. But I wasn't blown away by the image quality. Now, take this with a grain of salt here, because I said this at the beginning when we were talking about the Sonys, that you can't really take CEDIA as an objective measurement or an objective gauge of how all of this stuff really is, because the rooms aren't necessarily ideal. The setups aren't necessarily ideal. Sometimes things are very wrong. Like in one of the sound rooms, the subs were turned way down too low. And I think part of it wasn't necessarily that they were down too low. It's that the speakers that were in there were so efficient and didn't distort at all. It just didn't sound loud enough. So they needed to turn that up. So just remember when I'm saying all of this that it's not necessarily a real world reflection on the performance of these devices. So I want to make sure that people understand that. I'm just talking about the demos that we saw. The Epsons didn't really show very well. They played a bunch of clips on a 4-way masking screen. I think it was a director's choice. I think it was a 4-way masking screen. May have been a constant width, but it did. I think the image may have been too big. Like it was the entire wall in one of these rooms. The colors really didn't pop all that well. Maybe it was the screen material they were using, and there was something really weird going on with the motion. I don't know if it was the source device or what, but the motion, and Epsons usually have really good motion. The motion was really funky in these rooms. Tarhoya says it was a 4-way director's choice. Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Trying to think if there was anything else.
I want to send you in private chat. Click that link that I just put in there and share on your screen briefly.
Mm-hmm.
It is a link to kind of talk about the lenses. So the 3000 and the 7000 do not include a lens. You have to get a commercial lens. And this is a link for the 7000 lenses. And I think the 3000 is the same. You might have to control mouse wheel up. There you go. So these are the lenses that already are on the market that work for this.
Mm-hmm.
There is no high contrast lens from what we've been reading on the forum. But these lenses are in the $1,500 to $3,000 range new. So they're not terribly expensive, and there's a lot of variety here. So what this amounts to is you pick the lens that works for your install, for your distance, that kind of thing. For the
which I think is great. I think that's fantastic. But hold on, my daughter's talking. I'll come up in a little bit, sweetie. I'm finishing my stream. Sorry. She made me a bracelet. Did your daughter make you a bracelet, Jonathan?
I did not get. I'm going to have to get onto my daughter.
Okay, she's bringing me the bracelet.
Sloan, where's my bracelet? Do I get one too later?
Did you make one for Jonathan? No, you didn't get one. She's coming though. So she's down here. Wow. Oh, hold on. She's giving me the bracelet. Wow. Look at that. Look at this. Which one is it?
They're both.
Oh, I got both. You made these both for me?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
No, they're actually mine.
Oh, you made these. Hold on, chat. Look at these.
Oh, nice.
Yes. It's got a pumpkin and a flower and stars. Yes. Aren't you jealous? Those are cool, Sloan. All right,
Beautiful.
Mom wants you. So Tarhoya says it was a Stuart Phantom Hailer Plus that was in this room, which that's an ALR screen, which is kind of an interesting choice for that room. Why would they do that? It had fabric walls. Why would they choose an ALR screen? That's interesting. Is she doing a merch drop? You wish. You wish. Anyway, I like the idea of the interchangeable lenses.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish the pricing maybe was better. I mean, $30,000.
It's too
for
much.
A commercial. That's not the right way to go.
They missed the mark. I agree on the pricing. All the way top to bottom, they missed the mark. Everything should have been cheaper.
They did.
Scroll down a little bit for me on this same page, and you'll see this is the 7000 again. Right there, the second sentence, or the second line, first sentence. Strong native contrast to 3000 to 1 is what it's worded there on the 7000.
I'm expecting that it's probably a little less than that. I'd imagine they probably did measure that, but probably under lab conditions.
That you can't replicate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of between 2,000 and 3,000.
Now, I want to put this in perspective for our audience here. And yes, JVC has so far surpassed this with their native contrast. There's no question. But I want in perspective, and we talked about this on the last podcast, or maybe it was 2 ago, 2500 to 1 is what the traditional IMAX contrast ratio is defined as. Like that's their standard.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not 40,000 or 80,000 to 1 like JVC does. That's clear. But it is in the realm of like commercial cinema at a nice theater, like an IMAX theater. Now, if you want to,
can you link one of those reviews that did measurements?
Yeah,
from
I
a
can.
respected.
Ars Technica has an article on it. Ars Technica.
Did they do measurements?
They just defined it. I mean, they just saying IMAX has this standard.
No. I'm asking MW to define.
Oh,
because they're saying reviews are out for the projectors. So.
Well,
but you're right.
Yeah, do they have contrast specs? Because I saw some of the German video reviews, but I didn't see numbers on them.
Mm-hmm. Above?
Maybe I missed the newest stuff.
Above 3,000 to 1? It did not look like it was above 3,000 to 1 in that room, but it could have been because of ambient light.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching in a bright room, it's hard to tell anything, isn't it? In white-walled room?
We don't see your link, MW. It must have deleted it.
Probably dropping it.
Yeah. Can you PM it to Jonathan or myself? He's going to...
I saw in one of those videos they were showing an NZ8 versus one of the Epsons.
That's what he's talking about.
Sort of like it was just static shots. They weren't doing a true side-by-side. They were like turning one off or covering one lens and letting the other one show, and it was kind of going back and forth. And there's a significant, I mean, we saw it when we did our projector comparison with double stacking the Epson versus, the LS12000 when we did the double stack. There's a significant difference between doubling the lumens, It would be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, 3001 native contrast isn't a terrible image. Like it's
like a VA panel, if you will, without local dimming. It's like VA monitors.
Yeah.
Those are 3001 advertised. So it's not like IPS is worse. IPS is like 1,000 or 1,500 to 1. VA is like 3,000 to 1. OLED is like infinity to 1 type thing. There's a ratio, of things that are acceptable, and 3,000 is acceptable to some people and not acceptable to other people. That's okay.
I can't copy that comment. Like I can't. Doesn't let me highlight it. But anyway, 2500, 3001, not a bad image, but if you put it next to something that's way better, you're gonna have a problem. Now, if this thing has insane ANSI contrast numbers, all of that may be forgiven.
This is the link that MW says to search on YouTube to see the video. So we'll just put that up there and let you guys kind of look that on your own.
And he says the timestamp of 1530. So try that and then chat, report back. Let us know what you think. So that is the 3,000, 7,000 are kind of the same thing. Just one's brighter than the other. You've got 3,300 lumens, I think 8,000 lumens, and then 10,000 lumens. Is that right? Or is it 6,000 and 10,000? I don't remember.
It's 6,000 and 10,000.
6,000 and 10,000.
One of the things that Haterade Cowboy, one of the other YouTube guys, was at CEDIA and talked to the Epson rep, and he was talking about in his little video overview that with these interchangeable lenses, one of the options is like 2 or 3 feet away from the screen.
Yes, I did see that, and that was cool. That was super cool.
You could have like 6 or 10,000 lumens that close to the screen. The idea he was talking about was like, hey, you can hide this in an HVAC drop-down vent or in some sort of column or something where you have a retractable screen. Your projector is not visible in the room. Like if you had a aesthetic room that you cared about, and you don't want to make it, all blacked out or whatever, it's a living room space, you could hide the projector completely and have it on a bright wall. 10,000 lumens is enough to watch it during the day with the lights on, even sports and so forth. So that makes an interesting, proposition for some use cases.
That is super cool. I did really like that idea. It looked like a inverted periscope where the projector was facing away from the wall, and then you had a mirror that came down and it fired back into the wall. That was super cool. Like that, I'm sure a lens already existed like that. Barco and Christie make they look like periscopes, and they're just mirrors. That's all they are. And they allow for some really cool mounting positions or abstract mounting positions where the projector can be vertical, it can be sideways, it can be all these different ways, and it allows for a lot of flexibility. So that was cool. But now let's talk about the QB1000. The QB1000 is 3,300 lumens. It's $8,000. I haven't seen any reviews on it yet, so I don't know what its measured, actual measured contrast is.
They've been saying 5,000 to 1 on the
5,000.
forums, which is the same as the Epson.
It's the same. So you do get dynamic tone mapping, which I didn't. There was content. It was not a great video experience, but I think a lot of it was the room. So take that for what it is. And the motion was not great. Something was going on in that room. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't an objective comparison. I'll just say that. If the QB1000 is really only what's the LS12000? 2,700?
2,700. So
you figure you're going to lose 20%, if not a little bit more, for after calibration.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying $3,000 more dollars for 600 lumens. I guess you do get adaptive tone mapping. Anything else?
Those are the big things, is that it gives the dynamic tone mapping for HDR and it gives you extra brightness. I think that's the main idea.
My mic is breaking when I get too close. Okay, I'll stand back. Maybe I need to turn it down. I'll sit back a little bit, which is better for me anyway. Thanks for letting me know. The 1000 should have been a direct replacement. Do you think that's the case, Jonathan?
It's not, according to the forums. It's
well,
not
I know, but you think it should have been.
As in, like, this is the 13,000 now, and
yeah.
I don't know what. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of wiggle room between, but what you can almost expect now is that there will be an LS12000 replacement that might be the 13,000, the 14,000, and instead of having 3,300 lumens, it'll have 3,000 lumens or something, right? They'll split the difference between the two, and maybe it'll be another generation, another cycle out, like next year or the 2 years out or something. Mm-hmm. But they're keeping the LS12000 on the roster.
They are. That was confirmed at CEDIA.
Mm-hmm.
I do think and wish that the QB1000 was a direct replacement for the LS12000, because I don't really see the point in it being $3,000 more. If it was 4,000 lumens, maybe, 45 something over 4,000, I could get on that train. But the 3,300 lumens, I'm not feeling it. Would you agree?
Someone asked me that on the forum the other day. Like, he said, I have the money for the new 1,000. What do you think about that versus the 12,000? And I said, from my perspective, with my financial pocketbook, which is what you're asking, I think they overpriced. I think they overpriced the 1,000 is what a bottom line. Like, I guess I will hang on that until I see the HDR processing to see how much it improves. But if it's kind of a minor improvement and you get 20% more lumens, it seems like a lot of money for $3,000. If it's a major improvement, like if it approaches something like an external processor in any way, then maybe someone would think that was worthwhile. But I personally haven't even found the HDR processing on the LS12000 to be that bad. Like, I've enjoyed my time with it, even in HDR. I don't automatically switch everything to SDR. Mm-hmm. I don't have an external processor, and I find it sufficient for the most part with the built-in one on the LS12000. So
you bring up a good point there, and I think a big part of that is, unless you have two of these directly next to each other, like say the LS12000 against something either with a video processor or display that has better HDR tone mapping, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know and you don't have a reference point, you don't know. So you enjoy the content regardless. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a perfect example of what's happening potentially here. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, the LS12000 brings so much to the table for its price point that, of course, there's going to be compromises, and some of those I think can be forgiven given its price point and the other things that it brings to the table that are beneficial, like 4K 120. If you compare it to something like the JVC, which is the NP500 or the NZ500, it does not have 4K 120. It is 4K 60. So I think that's a win.
So what do you think would have been like if we were Epson's marketing team and we were trying to figure out a price point for this? Because it doesn't cost Epson $3,000 more to make this. Let's be clear. What do you think is a legitimate price increase that consumers would find acceptable? Because I'll tell you from reading AVS forum like too much and being too involved there is a lot of outcry on this. They think that price is too high, and people who are holding out to buy this are now saying, it left my price range. The feel I get on the forums, and I think where my own personal feel is probably weighing into this, is if it was like 6,000 or 6,500 MSRP, I would probably buy one.
It needed to be a direct replacement. If they did 6,000 or 6,500, they needed to get rid of the LS12000 and just raise the price and give you more. Because I think their worry was if the price is too close, it impedes on the sales potential of the other one. So they priced it separately enough that they wouldn't fight each other.
Well, I'm going to be just real frank here and say when Sony lost their executive to go over to Epson, I worried about Epson's price. I mean, I called this like a year and a half ago, and I don't even know behind the scenes, so maybe it's being arrogant to say I called it. But when we heard Sony's executive had left Sony to work on the Epson projector division, the Sony projector executive left for Epson and got hired at Epson. I worried at that time that Epson would have kind of a price point increase, like their tiering would go up, and that has occurred, whether it's related to that executive or not. But it just, Sony for years has been overpriced as far as projectors go. For years has been overpriced, and Epson has not been. So the writing was kind of on the wall, in my opinion.
Well, I think people will buy it from certain channels. I don't think the enthusiasts are going to buy it at all, which
Epson had a huge percentage of the market because they were the affordable option. And now it's ironic because JVC has taken that spot with this generation. JVC now has the $5,000 or $6,000 projector that's like a nice projector.
I mean, well, let's talk about that. So you've got the NZ500 against the LS12000 now. The NZ500 is $6,000. The LS12000 is $5,000. Which would you buy?
For my eyes, with my unique use case, I'd still buy the Epson.
Well,
if I didn't have that, I would almost have to say go with the JVC. Unless you're a gamer who wants 120 hertz, then I think the JVC seems like the better value now.
Yeah. So this is the JVC. I think this was a good move by JVC.
It's an interesting move because it flops their normal. They're normally the top player, and then they command a price for it, and then they've kind of been more reasonable about it, really.
This was a good move by JVC. They're going to dominate the market with this.
By the same tier, Ryan, and I'll be interested to see what your perspective was, but there were people on the forums, several people, not just one, same sorts of threads, people that went to CEDIA saying, hey, look, they played the NZ900 and the NZ500 back to back. So that's JVC's flagship with JVC's entry level, 25,000 versus 6,000. Is that what it is? Did I get the numbers right?
26,000 against 6,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So $20,000 difference. And they said the difference, as far as they could tell, now this is basically just watching real world content, but it's back to back, same room, same screen, everything was only difference they could tell was a little bit of brightness difference. Like they said they thought the 500 knocked it out of the park. That's the kind of stuff I was reading on the forums about this. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. Now, I will say that there are some features they've dropped coming from the NP5, which are kind of disappointing, and that's probably to meet their price point. They lost
4K
3D.
120. They lost 4K.
They lost 120 hertz. They lost the theater optimizer, which, take it for what you will, the theater optimizer was, hey, you set in your screen size, you set your screen gain, you set your distance, that kind of stuff, and it optimizes the automatic HDR tone mapping to your screen. How well it worked, you could argue, but it did make a difference. Like when I turned it on and off in my room, I could tell a difference because it was almost like changing, there's like 5 levels on the auto HDR selector with the JVC.
Mm-hmm.
It would basically like make it go one level higher in my room if I turned in that theater optimizer to where it was making the screen brighter because of my size of my screen and my throw distance and so forth. Like, so, I mean, it if you don't have a professional calibration done, it's kind of a little way to get an edge. It actually does change the color a little bit, even as far as like you put your screen type in there. Like I had a Seymour XD, I think it was code 134, 127 or something. I put in code 134, 127, whatever. And if you don't get a calibration, it's supposed to kind of change the color a little bit, as well as the HDR tone mapping to match your screen as best they can in a very generic, very low level way. But that's gone on NZ500. And in fact, I think it's gone on NZ700. I think you have to go all the way up to NZ800 to get into the theater optimizer right now.
Mm-hmm.
The new
MW asks, what screen size are you even getting with the 2000 lumens? So here's perspective on that. It wasn't too long ago that we were getting projectors that weren't even capable of 2000 lumens.
Right.
So,
from the flagships even.
Yes. Yeah. So most people don't need something insane for even large screens. We're kind of, this stream can kind of skew, I get it, on way down the way, especially because the MadVR Experience Center, which is 30 feet from me, has a projector that's capable of 35,000 isolumens. So I get it. But 2,000 lumens for the majority of viewers is not bad, especially if you combine with a positive gain screen, you're in a light controlled environment. A lot of people would be super happy with that. So I wouldn't really go down the path of worrying about that too much.
Give me a second here, Ryan. I think this is interesting and the viewers might be interested. So there's a post in here by Mike Garrett, one of the AVS Science sales guys, talking about the improvements from the NP5 to the NZ500. So that's their former entry-level projector, the NP5, to the NZ500, their new one. Mm-hmm. There's a high contrast optical block, which should improve the ANSI contrast type levels as you go up in the brightness, and it should improve contrast as you go up. It has 100 more lumens. It has a laser light source. It has improved dimming. He says it has improved tone mapping, but I'm not 100% sure I understand that or buy that, because what I read in the documentation, it looks like it might be the same dynamic tone mapping engine as the NP5, but you can correct me on that, Ryan, if you know. He says it's quieter. It has a new chassis that's a smaller form factor, and it has a larger lens. Mm-hmm. Now, the disadvantages of it, and this is my list that I came up with from just comparing the shot, and some of them we already talked about, but it lacks 3D. It lacks frame interpolation. So if you care about that, that's gone. Theater optimizer is gone. You lose 120 hertz. The NZ500 only has 12-bit gamut processing instead of 18-bit gamut processing that was on NP5. So, Ryan, maybe we can talk about that later if you know anything. If you don't, that's fine. The new NZ500 has a 15-element glass and plastic lens, and the old NP5 had a 17-element glass lens. So it seems like even though it's a larger lens on the NZ500, it might be a downgrade. Might be. Maybe. There's less lens shift angles on the NZ500. The old lens shift ability was 34 and 80 on the NP5 degrees, 34 degrees by 80 degrees, and the new NZ500 is 28 degrees by 70 degrees. It's not a full bandwidth HDMI port on the NZ500. Well, there's no 12-volt trigger anymore. There's 10 memory slots on the NP5 and only 5 on the NZ500, and you're losing an RS-232 port. So it's not... We're not just adding laser light source to the NP5 and saying everything else is the same or better. It's like there's a trade-off. You're losing some stuff to gain some stuff at that price point.
There is a trade. I think it's a good projector though for the money.
I've talked to Andy a little bit about this, Pixel Pusher 15 on the forums, who does some of the calibrations at M-Wave, and he's real excited about this one. He thinks that he might buy this NZ500 because he says that high contrast optical block is a big deal.
I mean, I didn't think that the NZ500 had that. I thought it started on the NZ700.
Well, Mike Garrett and Pixel said that had it, so maybe somebody doesn't have the right information. I'm not sure. It doesn't say it on that little placard there, but...
So I know MW's worried about the lumens, but here's perspective of this. If we compare like the NZ500 against the Griffin, right? Griffin's 35,000 lumens. The NZ500 is 2,000 lumens. That's 5%, right? So the NZ500 has 5% of the lumens as the Griffin. If I compare that to the NZ9 now, it's like 8.5%. So it's 3%. I don't think it's really going to help all that much with HDR content, especially when you consider screen size. I think it's more than enough for a lot of people, especially if you have a positive gain screen.
I'll look forward to seeing that one because I think there's some interesting trade-offs.
Oh,
like
the NZ500.
Yeah, with the plastic element in the lens. What is that? Why did they do that? That's curious. I wonder if that's going to result in seeing anything different or unique, or how much does a high contrast optics help the interesting contrast? Because that was one of my complaints about JVC entry level stuff in the past. If they fix that, like Pixel Pusher was saying, he was hoping that the high contrast optics meant that it would have the same interesting contrast as like the NZ8 or the NZ9, the outgoing units. And if that's the case, man, you're getting a really nice picture for that price.
Yeah. So then you have the NZ700, which is, did I pull it? Here it is. So then you have the NZ700, which is the replacement for the NZ7. I think this one's starting price point is $9,000. I think.
So they dropped it a little bit because the original NZ7 launched at $11,000, right?
Is that right, chat? Is it $9,000 or am I smoking something? I swear it is.
I think that's right, Ryan.
And then what's the NZ800 and the NZ900?
Did they keep their same price points before, like
15 and 26 or something like that?
Yeah.
I feel like this is 9. It has the 80 millimeter lens again instead of the 65. It's got the high contrast optical block. I think it has a better one. This one has the color filter. That's the difference. The NZ500 and the NZ700 have the high contrast optical blocks now. They're not as good as the ones above it, but this one also has the color filter. Now, the problem with that, as Jonathan, you and I have talked about, you sacrifice so much light with the color filter.
No, nobody uses that thing unless you got a tiny screen.
That's insane. You're losing like 30% of your light output for that thing. And
do you remember our testing in your room on that with the NZ7 and NZ8 with that color filter? Like all of us in the room, a handful of people, we were like, there's no way you'd ever use this. You'd rather have the extra brightness.
You may be able to see some slight variations or deviations in green, but if you don't know, you don't know.
They weren't side by side. And even when they are, do you remember us spending like an hour trying to pick out the differences in the color, flipping back and forth, and it was so dumb? That was so dumb.
I think the only reason JVC does this is because it pushes them into a higher color space, which I get from a marketing perspective, but using that, you sacrifice so much light output that it just makes the usability terrible. 30%.
Yeah, I would never use that.
No.
I just remember us spending like a half hour looking at cherries in a bowl, trying to figure out if the one with the color filter had any redder in any of the cherries.
I think we could.
Now flip it and look at this cherry.
I think we could barely, but
I don't think I could.
I don't think it was worth it at all. No way. No way. Now this one is 4K 120.
Yeah.
So you gain some of the stuff back.
Do they add frame interpolation on this, or is that you have to go to the 800 or 900 for that?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you think this is appropriately priced?
Not for me. I mean, $4,000 more? I don't think so. How do you justify that?
$3,000 more.
Okay, 6 to 9.
The NZ7 started at 11.
Here's what I've discovered over the years, man. This is my opinion, and I'm going to say something that will make some people upset or feel like they probably overpaid, according to my estimation. I've seen a lot of different JVCs now at this point in my life, and I've always, when I'm in different rooms with like an NX5 or NP5, thought, unless they're side by side, a lot of the difference ends up being just brightness, and if they're not side by side, you can't even see that. The value leaders are sure the low end on the JVC. They just are. If you have enough brightness out of the machine at the lower end of the spectrum, those contrast ratio things are so difficult to tell, and the brightness without a side by side is difficult to tell. The value's just right there. The value kings are it's hard to argue against that.
Mm-hmm.
And just frankly, I won't mention a name here, but I know a friend of mine who really does a lot of calibrations and so forth. He has an NX5 and he bought a NZ8. And the NX5 and his objective measurements pretty much
Measures
across
better.
the board was better than the NZ8. And so he
Mhm.
resold the NZ8. Now, that should never happen, right? Because the NX5 is $5,000 and an NZ8 was $15,000 and a generation newer. But
Mhm.
that's not how he had a golden sample NX5 and not a great sample NZ8. And unfortunately, if you're if you're at a point where sample variation makes that much difference, then there's probably not enough difference between these projector tiers to justify those price increases. That's where I fall out.
Yeah. It all comes down to you're paying for the brightness. They're so close, and the specs, how they word the specs, I think makes you believe that they're further apart than they are. And they are when you consider percentage points of the color spectrum and all of that stuff and volume. But realistically, going back again for the umpteenth time, what you don't know, you don't know. So I think a lot of times what you're ending up paying for is lumens. That's really it. Because with the brighter image comes a lot of satisfaction. I mean, we see this all the time during the CEDIA demos. And if you go into big box stores and stuff, there's a reason why all displays are in torch mode. People like the brightness, even if it clips, it doesn't matter. So a lot of times you're paying for the brightness in a lot of these situations.
MW asked about this, Ryan. You got a perspective on that?
So this is, I think MW is talking about the MSRP'd 8,000 lumen Christie, which was in Soundroom 7 on a gray screen. It's going to have like 1,500 to 1 native contrast. It's a single chip DLP. That is a limitation of those projectors, is the contrast. It's got almost 8,000 lumens. I think for the money, if you put it on a gray screen, you're going to have a good image. You're going to have a bright image. And I think it'll satisfy a lot of people for what it is. And it's DLP, so it'll be super, super sharp. I mean, Christie knows what they're doing. They own the projector market in the U.S., the commercial projector market. So something to be said for that. Planet Hulk drops a $5 super chat. Says, hello, SVS PB16 going on discount. Would you take the deal or take a chance with the new 17s?
What kind of discount?
Yeah.
We kind of mentioned that earlier. Thanks for the super chat, first off. We kind of mentioned that earlier that you're going 1 inch increase in size, and the box doesn't look to be like noticeably bigger. The differences on test, you'll probably see in Audioholics, they should be pretty minimal. So if you can get a good price on that outgoing SB16 or PB16, whichever one you're looking at, I think that's the way I would go.
Yeah.
1 inch is just not enough to make a huge difference on the specs.
Not the best measuring sub, but for the money, it's a lot of value. So if you can get a good deal, take it. Take it. And a lot of people will buy them. So if you try and resell it on the market, people like the SVS name.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you also, I mean, they're prolific in the classified section on AVS form.
Oh yeah.
Because as people go from like SVS to like JTR or PSA or one of the big daddy type subs with larger drivers and more output power, realistically, those, like, if you could probably save $1,000 on whatever you're finding on your sale price just by buying something gently used if you're willing to do that.
Maybe he's getting an excellent price, but saying what Jonathan just did, that also means that people are buying them used. So if you should feel confident that if you do buy it, you'll be able to resell it.
Oh yeah, there's a market for them in and out.
Absolutely. For sure. All right, so we talked about the 700. 800 and 900 now, baby. I think it's just more of the same. I mean, you're going to glass. 700 also got this with 4K 120. They're saying now that it is 100% of DCI-P3. I'd have to see a measurement on that. But these have been out for a while, so people seem to like them. But I agree with you that I think the sweet spot is the entry level, and don't deviate from that unless you need the brightness. But the brightness is nice once you have it. It's hard to go back. Hard to go back.
Oh, and the other thing that might be interesting for some of these guys in the chat that are maybe thinking about putting together a projector system, the 2-generation old JVCs, which still throw an excellent picture. They're bulb-based, but they still throw an excellent picture, like the NX5, NX7, NX9. Those projectors are going for peanuts on AVS Classified right now. I saw NX9, which was a $17,000 projector when it was new. It sold for like $4,500 in the Classified last week. That's tempting to me even because that's got the big lens on it. It's still got nice HDR tone mapping. All these changes are incremental. And if
won't have a warranty though.
It won't. So you need to buy from a seller you trust. But realistically, JVCs traditionally have lasted decades. And so I don't think that's a bad way to go. If you're starting fresh and you want a nice projector, like a used JVC NX9 for $4,000 or $5,000, it's quite a machine. It really is.
I agree. Some of the NZs have had issues with QC, so just be aware of that. And as MW said in chat, they do have better contrast, the bulb ones, than their laser counterparts. It's like every generation that's gotten newer, the contrast has gone down a little bit. But that's usually a substitute for brightness. So moving on, we've got CEDIA, the Movia showcase. These are the chairs. I really liked these, but these are on the upper end of cushiness and bouginess. They're super nice and super customizable. Like I was telling Chad earlier, they are IP controlled, which is awesome. I could integrate that into the system in the Experience Center. I really liked these. I could see these being the next chair that's in the Experience Center. I can't really sell my couch as a dealer, so I got to find something that makes sense and that I actually really like. I have a hard time putting and buying things in the Experience Center that I don't like myself to sell. I like being authentic. That doesn't mean that things that aren't in there I don't like. It's just I've had a hard time finding something to replace my couch with, and I think these might be it. These have a similar thing to your couch where the back comes up, and then it also has leg rests that'll come out. But they're fully customizable. And the armrests in the middle, it slides forward to cover everything. It's on like a track. So that was cool. Won't spend too much talking about furniture, but I really liked those Movia chairs.
So it's interesting that those kind of following your same motif, black room, white to kind of accent the black room, I guess. But in a projector room, it's a little unique.
There was a gray set in the room next to it. So I think they were just showing different colors. I don't think it was necessarily they were trying to get the best. It was just showing different colors. This was Seymour's 4-way masking screen. Was being controlled by the Lumigen. Lumigen and MadVR now have the ability to control automatic masking screens. So this was a great showcase of that. It did what it was supposed to do. I liked this room. This was the room with the 28-inch subs. It had 6 pros all the way around. Lots of output. I liked this sub. Very, very clean. But I have the black swans that were used as the LCRs in the MadVR Experience Center. So it's tough to dislike what you're already using. Won't spend more time on that one. Wattbox stuff. I don't think the general public cares about this. I would like this because Wattbox was releasing something that allows for 20 amp IP enabled PDUs. So I like these as a dealer because it allows us to remote in to our customer's place if there's an issue. We can check power, we can check like the Arachnus networks, and we can change things for the customers that don't want to do it themselves. And having a higher amperage PDU helps, because I was looking for these for the Experience Center at 20 amp and they didn't have them. They just had 15 amp. So these may get added. This was a cool one. I didn't dig into this one too much, but Sony has pro settings available on the Bravia series displays. So chat may look into this a little bit more. on what actually is part of this, but I think any more granular control that the end users can get out of their displays is a win. Like the more control you can have to turn things on and turn things off that are not part of hidden menus is just great. So hopefully this is not hidden behind a dealer login. I hope not, at least, because any more control, I think is fantastic. Having a TV auto wake on Signal, I think, is also super cool. We need more of that, like your monitor. Why don't they do that?
You'd think they would.
You would think they would.
15 years ago.
And then lastly, let's talk about, I'm going to try and bring this up. This is the room that we were stationed at. I don't know if there's, is there a showcase of the room? This is it. So this is, kind of fast forward this. This is the Trinov room. So I'll just let this play. This is where we were stationed while we were at CEDIA. So this was the rack that we were using. Mad VR, Kaleidoscape, Trinov Altitude 32, the Trinov expansion module, 2 PA16s. I think he's going to open the door and show the Nerthus. Let's see if he does that. Try and fast forward. Oh, this is the back of the rack right here, and then in just this couple seconds you'll see the Nerthus.
You see the graffiti on the wall. Chad was here and stuff.
So there's the Nerthus.
Yeah.
Big boy. The reason that graffiti is there is because this room was actually used at Wisdom in 2017. So this room's been reassembled multiple times, which is super cool because it's freestanding. I'm actually thinking about doing something like this for events. It just provides a tremendous amount of flexibility. This was how the room was set up internally. 3 rows, 14.
It's a huge room.
It was not small. It's 20 some feet wide and 30 some feet long. It had 14 D215Ss in it. And it was a good experience. It was using the, what was it using? The Perlison S7T Special Editions up front, and then S5Is all the way around, and S4Ss up top. So people really liked what they heard. And then Nerthus was firing onto a Seymour Screen Excellence Neo screen, and the room was created by Officina Acustica, who is the same guy, same boys that did the Mad VR Experience Center. So, like it. I don't think I've got anything else. We covered quite a bit. We've been on for over 2 hours.
There's some pen stuff in here, but I think we covered some of them. So I'm going to try to
go through the
ones we touched. This is one that we didn't cover for sure.
Direct or DSU? So Dolby Surround upscaling.
I'm going to assume, and you can comment on it if we're getting this wrong, but I'm assuming he's talking about native or using the upscaler.
That would be my guess.
Versus direct, because direct as a stereo output with no subs is not how you would watch a movie. So I'm going to assume that's not what he's talking about.
But maybe that is what he's talking about, and that's why he thinks that.
If that's what he's talking about,
I wouldn't do that.
There's no subs, and it's literally just left and right only.
I know,
at least
but
Dan and Marant's product.
Maybe there's a lot of variables in that question.
Does Storm have a direct mode?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
it is a native mode.
With Onkyo, Denon, and Marantz, those are the ones I'm familiar with off the cuff. That disables subs. It disables all processing. It's just basically like left and right channels. So let's figure he's not talking about that. He's talking about native versus upscaling. Do you think the experience, the dialogue is any different between the two? I don't think I noticed the dialogue being different between the two.
Between native and Dolby Surround upscaler? I don't know. Hold on. I gotta.
I'll speak to it while you're getting your goodnight kiss. In my experience, there are occasions where the native is better than the upscaler, but they're few and far between. Um, I've noticed it sometimes with some music where the up mixer will do something kind of strange. It'll maybe put something in the ceiling channels that you don't think would be great for like a 5.1, uh, maybe a Dolby Digital soundtrack. And very specifically, like I have some that comes to mind. I always use the end credits of The Hobbit um, when the dragon says, when he says, "What have we done?" Because the dragon's unleashed and he's going to go destroy the village. Then it rolls the credits and there's some beautiful music, and it's acoustic music, and it does something weird with the up mixer on. So I like that with native. But this kind of stuff where the up mixer messes up is few and far between, and I don't think it's very often with dialogue. It's more like the surround channels are putting something they shouldn't have.
I don't really like using up mixers because I never know if what I'm listening to is as accurate as it possibly can be, but I'm being snooty. So you've used the up mixers a lot more than I have.
Almost exclusively, unless I discover something that I don't like, which is very rare.
You do quite a bit, so I would definitely go with your opinion on this one.
Extremely rarely you'll run across something that's not right, and I don't think it's dialogue based. So give us, if you're on the chat still, give us some specifics of what you're talking about, and I'll test it out and let you know what I think, on your specific example. Okay. Next. So then, this should be another topic. I don't know if we want to dive into this right away, do we? Do you have a summary that you can come up with, or should we make this a whole video?
Hey, first time catching the stream during I am planning to build me a personal theater, all because of the inspiration of this channel. I am so sorry. What are some things I should or shouldn't watch for? I'm going to try and just put this very briefly. I think we should talk about this next week. I think this would be a good topic for next weekend. I think the biggest thing that people run into is they fall into these rabbit holes and then they just keep digging. They just keep going. Like I did this when I was first getting into this hobby on DAX. And I thought that I fell into the audio science review rabbit hole. And this is not saying that is a bad website. It is just saying that there is a level of diminishing returns if any return is being given. Now, there is some psychoacoustics that go along with this, with how you perceive all of this, how you perceive the audio given what type of equipment you're using, so on and so forth. So I think the biggest one that a lot of people fall into is falling into a rabbit hole, and instead of climbing out, they just keep digging, and the dirt is going up in the air and falling down on top of them. And they can't get out. So you end up going down these ways where that money would be much more apt being placed somewhere else in the room, especially on acoustic management or room design. People buy all of this equipment and then they don't deal with the room. They try and jam all of this really nice equipment into a room that is not suited for it or is not properly set up. I think that's the biggest thing that I'll talk about right now. Jonathan?
I think I'd like some time to think about that one. There's a lot of different ways to go.
I just tried to give him one topic. Like, we'll talk more about it next week. But if there was one thing that came to mind, what would you pick? Doesn't have to be the biggest one. What would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, I there's a lot of caveats to this, but the snake oil piece of the hobby and the diminishing returns piece of the hobby, to me, would be the things that I would advise against. Because especially around product launches, you'll notice that there's an incredible amount of hype. Like, this is life-changing, world-changing, yada, yada. And then it's like a 6-month cycle or 3-month cycle, and it's on to the next thing. And when you get it, expecting it to be world-changing, it's a tiny little evolution over what you already had in this sector way too often. So
I'd agree. Good answer. Cody, we'll talk about this next week, so make sure you tune in. We typically stream on Sundays and not Mondays. So make sure you check it out.
Okay, so then, and we need to talk about that, Ryan, because I have a Bible study that's starting up that's on Sunday night, so I might need to move it if we can.
We'll change the time.
Okay. So then here's the next one. And then two people asked this. So what was your favorite or most exciting demo product from CEDIA?
Mm-hmm.
And then Chris asked the same thing. When you cruise aisles, what was your personal best of show? So I know earlier you had mentioned you'd had to think about it. Maybe you haven't had a chance to do that, but did you have anything that really stood out as amazing to you?
I think the biggest amazement to me is how cheap video walls are getting. Now, cheap is, I don't actually mean cheap. I mean they're less expensive than they were. I mean, getting a 160 some inch video wall historically was several $100,000. The fact that they've now come down $1 under $100,000 installed that's pretty big progress in the last year or two. So that was pretty cool. What was another big one that I thought was really exciting?
Did you see anything besides like the home theater stuff? Did you go into the computer section or any of the other like electronic sections besides?
There's not really big sections for that anymore. It's mainly home
Really?
theater. ISE has a lot more of that. ISE is cool.
So video walls was the
Video. Well, the
standout.
price of the video walls. What was the coolest thing that I saw? The coolest thing that I saw. Go on to another question. I'm going to think on that one for a couple more.
Okay. Cody says,
We did that one.
wait
already.
a minute. I thought I must have unstarred one other one because that shouldn't have been there.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, whoever we missed. Pricing on projectors. My namesake says, why do we see so many Chinese short throw projectors versus long throw? That could be disrupted the price in projectors. My question on this would be, why are the Chinese manufacturers not making any long throw projectors? Why are they
really
only doing
cheap
short
ones?
throw?
They do really cheap ones. Like the really itty bitty ones that you see advertised that put out like 5 million lumens that are the size of like a grapefruit or something like that. Maybe because the light sources are cheaper. I don't know. That's actually a decent question. I don't have an answer for that. Do you?
No, I don't know either. To me, in my opinion, I haven't seen where they are actually truly disruptive yet on the big three, Sony, Epson, and JVC. I think they could get there. I think it's probably coming, and I think they make iterative improvements. But to me, this is a little bit like the TCL TV versus the LG. Like, you can get a TCL TV, and it will look okay in a vacuum, but if it's right next to an LG, the LG is going to knock its socks off, the OLED. I think that same thing applies with the Chinese projectors versus the big three. Right now, anyway.
I would agree.
Okay.
Yep.
Next one. This is a question I share with Chris. Did you bring home an Epson?
No.
Dang it, Ryan.
That's in the works.
Is it really?
They don't have any available right now. Yeah, there was. I'll probably get one.
Keep hounding them.
No,
I'm really
I have
in
a contact at Epson, so I'm going to try and get one. It's probably going to be the QB. I'd like to get a QB and a QL just to be able to compare them. But they want to try and get me one, at least for MadVR, because we need to know how to properly set them up. So hopefully I'll be able to get one. I do like what they're doing. Like, I like the ideas and the motivation and stuff. I just think everybody, or most, I can't say everybody, most manufacturers missed the price mark this year, unfortunately.
Okay, and then we got this one. White Glove Review said he picked up a couple UM1822 drivers. Sealed enclosures are 4 cubic foot. Will the subs go lower if you put them in a larger enclosure? Not lower. They will go lower with less power. We could say it that way. So it takes it with less air resistance and more cubic airspace in there. There's less resistance on the driver. You can hit the same frequencies with less power being applied. So if you think about like an open baffle where there's very little resistance, you can take very little power to drive the subs to their full frequency response. But if you have a very small box, you need more power to get to the same place. Now, Another interesting thing, since you mentioned that white glove review, is that you and I share a little something together. I bought 3 more UM18s, 22s to to make sure all my chairs have near field. So I'm not doing anything crazy.
You have as many
except
subs
for-
as I do now.
I do. I guess I didn't even think of that till just now, but that wasn't the intent. The intent
You have
is
11.
just so I have a near field in every seat. That's
Ryan has 11, so I need 11.
if you were playing that game, you got a 50 and 2 32s and a bunch of 21s.
I don't know what
in
you're
that
talking.
space.
I don't know what you're talking about. Just imaginary numbers.
But yeah, 4 cubic foot is a good match for those UM18 22s, and sealed is the right way to do it, in my opinion. So the last one here
is back to this question.
No, but we do need to come back to that question. Correct.
Ryan, can you comment on how the Christie Griffin looked there? AVS member said it was bad. I could comment on it. I know why, but I'm not going to say anything. I haven't
even read that on AVS forum, so I must have missed that thread.
I don't want to cause drama, so I'm going to plead the fifth. I'll never mind. I'm going to plead the fifth. I'm not going to go any further than that. So.
All right. So coming back, did you have anything else to add to your favorite? Nothing.
Trying to visualize everything. I said video walls already. One of the coolest things, I'll talk about a couple of them. One of the coolest things was the Officina room, because I hadn't really paid attention to how that room goes together. And there's a lot of really cool things that can be done with a room like that. So we're going to try and have some conversations about the future and things like M-Wave and what can be done there. Because I think a room like that to showcase things would be very, very cool. To be able to stand up in any location, to be able to put a theater in it, and show what is possible. Obviously, there are some compromises because it's not like having a room built in a home. It has some limitations, especially with acoustics and vibrations and things like that. But there's some cool things that can be done. That room is going to the Trinov headquarters in Paris. So that's that for that room. But that was one of the coolest things, because I built it several times, but I've never really paid attention to how it goes together. As far as other cool things, oh man,
look at that pretty little necklace or little bracelet on your arm that Sloan gave you.
I was gone for a week, so she made me a bracelet. What would be one of the other cool things that I saw? There was just trying to think of anything that blew me away. The 28s are super cool. I mean, that takes a lot of innovation to do. It's cool to see new things come to the market. Not that square drivers are cool, but to see things that really no other manufacturer is doing is really nice. This isn't related to CEDIA, but I think it's very good to see companies like Kaleidoscape and MadVR bringing components to the industry that are less money. Now, $4,000 and $5,000 are still a lot of money, but in comparison to historically what those components have been, they provide much more approachable price points for more people to get into. So I'm very happy about that. They're seeing what some of the HDMI manufacturers are doing and trying to help the space, because I heard a lot of dealers talk about how they're running into problems with HDMI. Seeing people and companies trying to figure out ways to get around it, or to not get around it, but to fix it, is very, very nice to hear. Trying to think of anything else. Video walls. So one of the things that I liked, this is the last thing I'll say, and this is on the more expensive end, but this is something that I thought was interesting because we have solar at my house. We have 2 electric cars. My business partner went into see Savant, and Savant has a power system that manages power, and you can watch how much power each breaker on your house is utilizing, and then you can remotely get notifications if a breaker trips or if there's faults, and you can shed power in the event of a power outage and your generator kicks on. So I thought that was super cool. I don't have really any more information than that, but as far as a use case for things that we could use, I thought that was really cool. I tried finding other manufacturers that are doing that, and there's not really. I looked at Surgex. They're not doing anything. Looked at some other ones. Didn't see anything there. Anything else that was super awesome? The JVC NZ500. That's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks for recounting your experience, man. Sorry we didn't get started on 2 feet, but it's good.
It's okay. 4 feet. My 2 feet were here. Yours were not. So we'll talk about the time that we're going to stream next week. I think that topic is really good. Where's that question? I want to make sure that we talk. Well,
but what it was just starting a new theater. What roadblocks or what obstacles would you help me avoid?
Oh, yeah.
Something along those lines.
All right. Good. So let's talk about that. I hope that there will be more people that are going to provide objective data on what they saw at CEDIA. I think this is the last thing that I'm going to get, and then I'll get off my soapbox. I think there were a lot of people that have already released content that is just exacerbating the marketing machine. And I think it's really important that people question what they see and they try and get as objective data as possible before they make a purchasing decision. I think the industry has pushed for a long time as a marketing first approach, and you buy before you try and figure out what you're buying and what hurdles you need to overcome, right? So the proper approach for a lot of this, and we've talked about this a couple times in the past, is you should buy equipment that allows you to overcome certain shortcomings in a room, not buy equipment and then jam it into whatever room is going there because you think X equipment is good. Not all equipment is going to behave the same. And it's really important to find things that have an objective benefit to whatever it is you're trying to do in a space. So I'm really hopeful that there's going to be more content creators that are going to review what they saw at CEDIA and take a really objective look at what was shown and try and look past all of the marketing. But at the same time, I realize that some of the things that we criticized tonight may turn out to be much better than what the showing was and how they looked at CEDIA itself. Because just like what we run into at M-Wave, Jonathan, and I know, side with this, you can run into issues. You run into things that are unaccounted for, things break, things you don't think of, the rooms aren't ideal. There are always things that allow you or force you to show in a non-optimal way. So people also need to understand that how things, like I said, how things were shown at CEDIA do not necessarily reflect the full capability of that device, because maybe they were running into a limitation that they didn't tell the general public. So keep that in mind too while you're going through all of this. Just question everything you see, like you should in everything in life. Be skeptical. Nothing wrong with that. That's all I got. I'm done. Let's figure out a time for next week and keep this going.
You look like you just ran a race. Like you're beat up and tired. And
dude, I was at CEDIA for a week. Come on. For anybody that doesn't know, like CEDIA, when you're there, these rooms don't build themselves. So we were out. CEDIA opened on Thursday. I flew in bright and early Sunday morning, and we were building for 4 days before the show. Then you're in calibrating and fixing problems and doing all this stuff. Then you have the show Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You start teardown Saturday night. You finish teardown a lot of times Sunday night, sometimes Monday, and then you come home. So it's a lot of work. And then you're entertaining dealers. You're going to hang out with your friends that you only see a couple times a year. It's fun, but it's exhausting. Glad to be home. You should go next year, Jonathan.
I would like to. I've never been. I'd like to go. I should have gone this year. I had the opportunity. I just didn't pull the trigger.
You're going to go. I'm going to make you go. You're going to go. I'm going to put you to work. Okay. That's
all right, with that. Thanks for joining us, guys, tonight. It's been fun.
As always, thanks for coming to join us on the AV Experience. We'll do this again sometime next weekend because I have no idea when because Jonathan has a life or something. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good rest of your week.